Donc, d'abord, je voudrais vous remercier toutes et tous d'être venus pour cet événement organisé donc avec mes collègues Stefan Köhler et mon collègue Cassart donc Benoit Cassart pour le groupe Renew PPE et pour moi donc SND avec Sargiacomo. Je suis très heureux d'avoir pu organiser cet événement sur la vaccination, un sujet qui est au cœur de l'actualité depuis malheureusement de nombreuses années. Et c'est une vraie satisfaction d'avoir pu organiser cet événement. Alors, pour ma part, vous allez comprendre pourquoi je suis particulièrement concerné. Je viens du sud-ouest de la France, une région d'élevage, pour ceux qui ne la connaissent pas, qui est connue notamment pour ses canards gras et ses volailles maigres, puisque je rappelle que le premier label rouge en France depuis 1965, le numéro 0001, est effectivement le label rouge du poulet de Saint-Sevé, pour ceux qui l'ignorent, et j'habite Saint-Sevé. Et l'IG protégé date de 1996 sur ce poulet. J'ai donc été aux premières loges, comme vous pouvez le comprendre, du drame qu'ont vécu nos éleveurs et nos éleveuses avec la grippe aviaire, l'influenza aviaire. Voir son élevage se faire abattre est un traumatisme que je ne souhaite à personne. Ce qui est vrai d'ailleurs pour la volaille est vrai évidemment pour les bovins et malheureusement, trop souvent, les éleveurs sont confrontés à cette dure réalité. Heureusement, pour la deuxième année, maintenant, le recours à la vaccination fait la preuve de son efficacité et la sérénité revient peu à peu dans les élevages, notamment pour la filière gras. Le sud-ouest est également une terre d'élevage d'ovins et de bovins et eux non plus n'ont pas été épargnés ces dernières années entre la MHE, la FCO, en 2000, et je devrais dire aussi la tuberculose qui est endémique sur une partie du territoire dont je viens. Les virus ne connaissent pas de frontières administratives. Nous devons renforcer nos stratégies sanitaires au niveau européen. Il me semble également que nous devons être davantage dans la prévention que dans la réaction. C'est mieux pour nos éleveurs et aussi c'est mieux pour nos finances publiques. J'ai cru savoir que les lignes bougeaient du côté du Conseil et il me paraissait important de donner un écho à ces changements ici, au Parlement, le co-législateur. Malheureusement, la ministre française qui devait être parmi nous, Annie Genevard, devait aussi, elle nous a fait passer une vidéo, mais c'est un peu compliqué, on a des problèmes techniques, donc je m'en excuse auprès d'elle. Voulait venir, mais je sais qu'elle a ce sujet-là au centre de ses préoccupations et bien sûr nous aurons l'occasion d'en discuter avec elle assez rapidement, je suppose. Je tiens également à remercier Olivier Espèce qui a accepté d'endosser le rôle difficile de modérateur. Et oui, c'est lui qui va tenir le chronomètre pour les 3 tables rondes qui vont se succéder. Chaque panéliste aura 8 minutes et nous prendrons 15 minutes pour les questions-réponses à la fin de chaque panel. Afin de laisser entrer en scène, je laisse la parole à mes collègues donc Benoit Cassart et Stefan Köhler pour un mot d'introduction. Donc je vais passer la parole à ma gauche, à Benoit Cassart, voilà, ce qui est assez normal pour moi. Et là, j'arrête les allusions politiques.
Merci mon collègue de droite. Bonjour à tous et à tous. Merci, chers à mes collègues et aux équipes d'avoir organisé ce séminaire. Et merci à tous les intervenants pour leur expertise et les informations qu'ils vont nous apporter durant cette matinée. Merci aussi à la DG Santé qui répond toujours présent à nos sollicitations. Nous avions déjà parlé de santé animale en nous focalisant sur les maladies vectorielles lors d'un séminaire en décembre dernier. Nous sommes ici aujourd'hui pour parler plus globalement de santé animale et de vaccination. Madame et Monsieur de la Commission, si ces séminaires se succèdent, c'est parce que la situation est grave et l'inquiétude chez les éleveurs est de plus en plus grande. La filière porcine est affectée par la peste porcine africaine, la filière volaille par l'aviaire. Nous avons le retour de la fièvre afteuse alors que l'Europe était indemne. Sur la fièvre catarrhale ovine, je réitère les demandes formulées en décembre dernier. 1. Une harmonisation totale des règles à l'intérieur du marché commun pour ne pas entraver le commerce intracommunautaire. 2. Une stratégie vaccinale communautaire comme fait pour la Covid-19. Achat et stockage groupés pour une distribution harmonisée des vaccins au sein des 27 États membres. Enfin, nous savons qu'avec le réchauffement climatique, la langue bleue va devenir une maladie récurrente dans les élevages européens, y compris des pays du nord du continent. La seule action de prévention, c'est la vaccination. Nous devons unir nos efforts et travailler à un vaccin capable de couvrir le maximum de sérotypes existants. Couvrir les 26 sérotypes semble utopique, mais nous devons travailler à un vaccin multisérotype, il est urgent. Et laissez-moi conclure en mettant un autre point sur la table de notre discussion d'aujourd'hui. L'IBR, infection bovine rhinotrachéite, une affection respiratoire aiguë et contagieuse qui affecte les bovins. Je prends le cas de la Belgique parce que c'est celui que je connais le mieux, mais cela concerne aussi d'autres pays. Nous sommes engagés dans un programme de lutte contre la maladie pour obtenir le statut indemne en 2027, mais hélas, des animaux sont encore porteurs du virus. Nous savons que la vaccination... Voilà, monsieur Houtin, parfait. Nous savons que la vaccination est le moyen le plus efficace en matière de prévention et il nous paraît totalement incompréhensible l'interdiction de la vaccination pour l'obtention du statut indemne. La justification souvent donnée est le manque de fiabilité des tests de diagnostic. Mais les méthodes de test ont beaucoup évolué depuis 2006. En presque 20 ans, nous avons fait beaucoup de progrès. Et étant donné la contagiosité de la maladie, je rappelle qu'un animal en contamine 7 autres en 24 heures, la procédure d'autorisation de la vaccination est totalement inappropriée. La vaccination n'est autorisée uniquement en cas de confirmation du foyer, donc après l'apparition de symptômes, après intervention du vétérinaire, donc après la prise et l'analyse d'un échantillon et après transmission des résultats à l'autorité de santé, le cas échéant l'AFSCA. Une fois que vous avez fait ça, votre cheptel est totalement contaminé et selon la législation belge, en 90 jours, il doit être réformé. Le tout avec une indemnisation à charge d'un fonds de mutualisation financé complètement par les éleveurs. Je me fais porte-parole des éleveurs et des vétérinaires de terrain pour demander l'obtention du statut indemne tout en pouvant continuer à vacciner. Pour cela, les filières demandent de réouvrir le règlement délégué 2020-689. J'arrête là, car nous avons beaucoup de sujets à aborder et je ne veux pas enlever du temps de parole aux experts. Mais je voulais profiter de ce court discours d'ouverture pour insister sur la nécessité de prendre des mesures concrètes et agir vite, car la situation dans les fermes est très inquiétante. Merci beaucoup. Stéphane.
I would like to talk in German, maybe. Ein herzliches Grüß Gott auch von meiner Seite. Mein Name ist Köhler Stefan und ich bin neues Mitglied im Europäischen Parlament seit letzten Juli. Ich freue mich über die große Resonanz und die hohe Teilnahme heute bei diesem Event und möchte natürlich gerne meinen Beitrag leisten. Ich bin selbst noch Landwirt in Unterfranken, habe dort eine Mutterkuhhaltung mit Simmental und bin selbst auch zum Beispiel, wie es der Kollege schon gesagt hat, vom Blue Tongue Virus betroffen. Aber wir haben auch andere Krankheiten, sind schon erwähnt worden, wie die Maul- und Klauenseuche oder Foot and Mouth Disease in Germany, die erst im Dezember wieder ausgebrochen ist. Aber auch das African Swine Fever ist in Deutschland ein Riesenthema. Ich habe selbst gemerkt, was ein Virus auswirken kann. Auch in meinem Betrieb sind aufgrund der Infektion durch den Serotype 3 im letzten Jahr jetzt Kälber geboren worden, die missgebildet sind. Bei anderen Kollegen sind die Verluste teilweise bis zu 30%. Im letzten Sommer sind auch bei vielen Milchviehhaltungen die Milcherträge deutlich gesunken. Und der Serotype 3 hat größere wirtschaftliche Auswirkungen, wie es damals mit dem Serotype 8 war. Werden die Rinderhalter, ich sage mal, mit einem blauen Auge von der Sache wegkommen, sehe ich aber meine Kollegen, die Schafhalter, in einem viel größeren Problem. Sie haben gesagt, bitte helft uns, impft auch eure Rinderbestände, damit die Schafhalter nicht weiterhin größere Verluste hinnehmen müssen. Im letzten Sommer haben mir Kollegen gesagt, dass sie bis zur Hälfte ihrer Herde verloren haben. Und ich habe den Eindruck, dass wir der ganzen Situation meistens hinterherlaufen. Der Serotyp 3 ist durch Deutschland schon durch. Ich denke, der Serotyp 12 steht schon vor der Tür. In Holland ist er schon nachgewiesen. Und wir sollten jetzt eigentlich schon tätig werden, um dem Problem mal vor die Welle zu kommen und nicht hinterher zu laufen. Ich wünsche uns heute eine sehr informative Veranstaltung, viele gute Informationen, eine tolle Diskussion und vor allen Dingen ein effektives Meeting. Vielen Dank.
Maintenant, je vais proposer aux panélistes la première table ronde de venir. Monsieur Bernard Van Goten pour la DG Santé, Nancy De Bruyne pour la Fédération des vétérinaires européens, Frank Verdonk pour l'EFSA et Roxane Feller pour AnimalhealthEurope.
Merci, bonjour, je suis Olivier Espèce, donc je vais modérer ce meeting. Nous aurons besoin évidemment de bien tenir les délais, donc chers panélistes, je vous demande de respecter les 8 minutes. Je suis président d'une NGO, IABS, International Alliance for Biological Standards, qui est essentiellement une plateforme de rencontres sur la vaccination. Sur ce, sans plus attendre, j'introduis notre premier speaker, Bernard Van Goten, qui est directeur DG Santé, préparation aux crises. Bernard, vous avez la parole.
Thank you. I'll speak in English, and I wanted to show you a small presentation which will explain the use of the vaccination and to go through the various diseases which are affecting the European Union in 2024, but also before that. So first slide is the current situation in relation to blue tongue, and I'm sure after the debate I will have a lot of questions on blue tongue. There are a lot of uncertainty. I have my personal feeling, but I understand that on a political point of view this is more difficult. But blue tongue is now is widespread in the EU. The various serotypes which are circulating, you all know them, and they create losses for the farmers, and we would like to avoid those losses in any case. Next slide. It's about a disease which did not affect the EU, but it shows clearly the use or the usefulness of cooperation between countries, of vaccination, and how we can together avoid further spread of the disease. You will probably remember that lumpy skin disease arrived in Europe, in Greece, coming from Turkey in 2015. Then it went up northwest through the Balkan countries with a lot of outbreaks. And there, the Commission played a very important role, myself to coordinate the vaccination campaign in the Western Balkan. And we coordinated the vaccination campaign. If we can show the video, maybe. I know that somebody said that there is no video, but I really can't explain it without video. And I think it is very educative for all of us how a coordinated vaccination campaign can avoid further spread of the disease for a very specific disease, lumpy skin disease. The Commission bought vaccine which they give to all the Western Balkans, and through a mechanism which is called GFTAD, which is the, if you can play the video, it would be nice. No, but it was on the screen a couple of minutes ago, so. And it's a video from EFSA, so I really thank to Frank. We can see how the spread of the virus went from Greece to northwest, westward, and how the coordination of vaccination within the Balkans, so with all the countries, with that we managed to avoid further spread in Europe. If the video could work, it would be nice. Voilà, s'il marchait tout à l'heure. I'm sorry, can we have the video? I mean, we gave you the link also. Sorry? Well, I sincerely regret that it's not working, because it's, I think, very illustrative on how a coordinated vaccination campaign in an area which is, on a political point of view, very difficult, the Western Balkan, can avoid further spread of the disease. Can you still try to have it on, maybe on YouTube? I'm sorry to insist, but it's really a way of showing, I think, to everybody how the virus spreading can be stopped by coordinated vaccination campaign. And it's probably the best example in the world on how it has been done and how vaccination is efficient. And I thank EFSA for having done that video. So it's not in the European Union, but it was instigated by the Commission and through international mechanism. We did coordinate the vaccination campaign in all the countries of the Balkan, which is, as I said, quite difficult.
This video shows the development of outbreaks of lumpy skin disease and the vaccination campaign in the Balkan region. Lumpy skin disease is a disease affecting cattle that has significant economic implications. In 2012, the disease was spreading in the Middle East, affecting Israel and Lebanon. In 2013, it reached Jordan, Egypt, Iraq, and Turkey. The disease gradually spread all over Turkey, so that by the end of 2014, it had reached most of the country, and finally entered Western Turkey in 2015. In August 2015, lumpy skin disease entered Eastern Greece. In 2016, the Balkan region was the next to be affected, as the disease spread over Bulgaria, North Macedonia, Albania, Kosovo, Serbia, and Montenegro. However, after the disease spread to Greece, a regional vaccination campaign was launched in the Balkan region. In this map, the different shades of blue represent the percentage of animals vaccinated. This had a positive effect, and by the end of 2017, the number of outbreaks had fallen by 95% and remained concentrated in the areas with the lowest vaccination coverage. The disease had not been eliminated, however, so the vaccination program continued. In 2018, no outbreaks were reported in the Balkan region, showing the high effectiveness of the coordinated regional vaccination campaign. Nevertheless, outbreaks were still reported in Turkey, especially in the eastern part of the country, as well as in Georgia and Russia.
Okay, thank you. So you see with the shade of blue, which was the intensity of the vaccination, how the vaccination campaign could avoid the further spread of the disease, and by the European Union financing that, and by the European Commission also donating the vaccine to the Western Balkans, we were able to protect the EU from this disease. Next slides. Alors, HPAI, avian influenza, and that's the situation, the current situation for the winter. You see that there are far less outbreaks than in the previous years. You see here on green the HPAI in wild birds and in red in farms. So you see that the vaccination campaign in France, partially also in the Netherlands, in Ireland and in Portugal, was very effective to avoid further spread of the disease, and it does indeed reduce the number of outbreaks. And we have heard during the introduction that the southwest of France was particularly hit last year and the year before, the last season and the season before. So that's also due to the legislation which is in place and which, if not promoting vaccination, allows member states to start vaccination. Next slide. And you see here what I've just highlighted. So the drop of a number of outbreaks in poultry over the last winter season, where we saw a peak of outbreak during the winter 22-23. Next slide. Alors, why do we have a single animal health throughout the EU? The key drivers are there which are important. We want to have a high and to maintain a high level of animal health in the EU. And why? Because we want our farmers to be able to produce. We want a safe and effective functioning of the internal market, meaning that outside restricted zone, animals and products can move freely. And we want, of course, to take also account the One Health principle, especially when we are talking about avian influenza. Next slides. What are the main tools? I know I'm late, but I'm arriving at the end. What are the main tools? First, I mentioned the animal health legislation and the official control. As animal health is a policy which is fully harmonized, and therefore member states, when they act, being on foot and mouth disease like in Germany a month ago, or on peste des petits ruminants, they are using the tools which are there within the EU legislation. We have EU reference laboratory for which diseases which are very active. We have EFSA, and Frank will address the audience in a couple of minutes. We have contingency plan, which are also put in place by the member states. We have co-finance eradication program. And on the finance, I want to say something here. Following the outbreak of avian influenza, where we kill millions of birds, the financial situation of the Animal Health Fund, so reimbursing the member states, is dramatic. I had a loss, or I was in minus of 450 million euro last year. So we had to reduce the percentage of co-financing of the member states. So that's an important issue that we need to tackle in the future, especially if we still continue to have outbreaks. We have international cooperation, and I mentioned GFTAD, which I've used to coordinate the vaccination campaign in the Balkans. And then last slide. We'll drop the rest. We have our online platform, which allows the tracing of the animals. We have the animal disease information system where member states are reporting the disease. We have a vaccine bank. We should not forget that the EU is the owner of the most important vaccine bank. And just to give you an example, on foot and mouth disease, we have around 35 million doses of antigens. And we have the EU veterinary emergency team. So those are specialists which are available 24/7 to support the member states when there is a problem. And they went lately to Germany to help, support, advise the German authority how to tackle best FMD. All that is done in cooperation between all the veterinary service of the EU, and I'm proud to say that all the actions which are taken within the EU are always taken and supported by all the member states. Voilà, I've been maybe too long. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bernard. Thank you. I call on Nancy Debrine, directeur exécutif de la Fédération des vétérinaires européens, de prendre la parole pour la présentation suivante. Merci, Nancy.
Thank you very much. Good morning to everybody, and dear MEPs, Eric Sargiacomo, Benoit Cassart, and Stefan Köhler. Thank you for the invitation. And thank you for allowing me to share a little bit the veterinary perspective on the central role in vaccination. So next slide. For those of you that are not aware of FE, FE is the umbrella organization for 46 national veterinary associations from 38 countries. And through our members, we represent about 330,000 veterinarians. And we also have different sections which represent veterinarians working in different disciplines, such as veterinary practice, government, academia, and so on. And our mission is to enhance animal health, welfare, public health, protection of the environment by supporting veterinarians in delivering high-quality expertise, which is recognized and valued. So next slide, coming to the topic of today more, what is driving animal disease outbreaks? I think without any doubt we've seen more and more outbreaks in the last years. Why? Now there are quite a number of factors and they all play a different role. So one of them, which already is here for quite a while, is of course globalization. People, animals and products are traveling, move globally, and diseases know no borders, so they can travel with them. A second driver of the main drivers is climate change, and that's one that is more prominent, becoming more prominent over the years. We see higher temperatures, more periods of drought, more periods of floods, and extreme weather events. And these, of course, facilitate emerging and re-emerging diseases. And no doubt the vector-borne ones are one of the most threatening ones. And then a third main factor I would like to mention here, and that I think is even becoming more important in the next years, is our geopolitical situation. Political instability raises the threat for bioterrorism and also can disrupt disease control. So these drivers facilitate and enable the spread of animal diseases, of which many are zoonotic. So next slide. And the effect of this is really devastating. And I think we here in the room all know how big the effects are of animal diseases. But in the wider society, I think it's not still so good known. So because these diseases really have a ripple effect. So they have morbidity. The animals get sick, are suffering, and I think all the farmers here that blue tongue outbreaks and other outbreaks know extremely well. They produce less, and of course it can also compromise food safety. Mortality, we had quite a lot of mortality, either via animals that died or the culling, and this caused huge emotional and financial burdens for veterinarians and farmers alike and reduces the food security. And then notifiable diseases lead to trade restrictions and can have huge economic losses. We all know that. And just as an example, now the recent small FMD outbreak in Germany is estimated to cost more than 1 billion. So this really shows how big these effects are of animal diseases. The good thing about this is that we have excellent EU rules. They were just illustrated here before, all the different tools that we have. And we also have very good collaboration international with the World Organization of Animal Health. So this we must strengthen and cherish very much. So next slide. So what can we do more? Well, I have 3 elements, and the first thing is prevention. Prevention is better and cheaper than cure. And that is especially true when we hear about that the co-financing is going down. So it's really necessary to investment, and there the animal health law gives us a great tool because it requires preventive veterinary animal health visits, which really have a great potential to improve animal health, animal welfare, productivity, and also the less use of antibiotics. However, we did an investigation in FE, and we really see that implementation of them is really fragmented, and a lot can be improved in several countries. So we should invest more in this and raise awareness for the need of preventive animal health visits and further increase biosecurity. Next slide. The next main thing that we can do is, and that's especially why we're here, boost the role of vaccination. We had already a very nice example before on lumpy skin disease. Vaccination is really a win-win situation. It prevents disease, protects animal welfare, and safeguards public health. However, challenges remain, availability, shortages. We see that there's still quite a bit of availability and shortages problem in different countries. Sometimes we have uneven vaccine distribution, and of course we have trade barriers. I think these are our biggest problems. Sometimes we have a vaccine available, for example, when we had outbreaks of Smallenberg, but nobody is using them because of the trade restriction. So, and we have to make sure that we can adapt easily the vaccine, so have an antigen and vaccines bank available. But more will be followed on the second panel as this. And then as last thing, I think we have to rethink a little bit the disease control strategies because at this moment we're eradicating a lot of animals, and this is it's questionable if this is sustainable in the long term. So maybe we should have an in-depth discussion on where mass culling still remains the best strategy, and if there are cases where we can avoid it. And then the third point is preparedness through a one-hand health approach. So FE very recently adopted a position paper on pandemic preparedness, which I will invite you to have a look at our website. So next slide. And the main things in that is to prevent, integrate veterinary expertise in veterinary biosecurity, biocontainment, and vaccination in public health strategies, respond, use diagnostics, real-time surveillance, and data sharing technologies for early detection and rapid response, and communication. Very important to have public trust through a transparent and clear messaging. And I think at these times this is even more necessary than ever, that we have a public support for vaccination, disease prevention and response. So last slide, just to conclude, we have a very strong system in Europe, also working very closely together with WOHA, but we will need to continue strengthen it. The main drivers for animal diseases, globalization, climate change, and the geopolitical situation will not go away easily. So to address them, we think if we can invest more in prevention, implementing robust veterinary health visits, boost vaccination and biosecurity, and further work on early detection and surveillance technologies, we can prepare ourselves for the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you for holding the time. And now I give the floor to Franck Verdank, qui est chef d'unité risques biologiques, santé, bien-être des animaux à l'autorité européenne de sécurité des aliments. Merci, Franck, de tenir le temps, si vous pouvez.
Good morning. Thank you to the members of the parliament to invite also EFSA to this very important and relevant event on vaccination. EFSA, we are providing scientific advice to the European Commission, the Parliament and the Member States, but we are not working on all the diseases that I already heard today. Our way of working, which is defined in the legislation, is that we are replying to questions that we get. So therefore, my aim today is to give you a bit of flavor of the type of advice that we have given in the past. So if we can move to the first slide. Yeah, our work starts with looking at the epidemiological situation of the diseases. And you can see there the map of France. It's an example what we have done, for instance, in our work on vaccination against highly pathogenic avian influenza. So we start to work together with the member states and their competent authorities to collect their data on the outbreaks, and then we develop disease transmission models and statistical models. So here for France, we got the data on the outbreaks on avian influenza in ducks. We got the same from the Netherlands on laying hens, and from Italy we got the data on turkeys. And with these three data sets, we developed then transmission models in which we could then do simulations for these three economically very important species for avian influenza. And on the left, you can see, just as an example, don't need to go into the detail of the figure, curves on the left, unvaccinated layers, and on the right, the vaccinated layers, because once we have this transmission model, then we can play and do different scenarios. And you can see the daily mortality in red, and you can see in the vaccinated scenario that we simulated there, it's lower, and the blue line, which is low on the left part and high on the right in the vaccinated part. So you can see that this specific scenario that we simulated for a vaccination was giving an indication that it would have been effective. In the middle, you can just see an example of a statistical model that we have used to look at what is the risk of incursion into a vaccinated area or a vaccinated farm, and what would then be the chance, the probability that you would also detect the outbreak in the vaccinated farm. But I will come back to that later on. Next slide, please. So here, I think this is the most important slide of my presentation, just an outline of the type of advice that we give. And I've grouped them into 4 different categories. The first one is our assessments on the surveillance strategies. I think very important, because surveillance is often the largest part of the cost of the budget of a vaccination program. So quite relevant to get scientific advice on that. Here you can look at early detection or the freedom of the disease. I will further give examples on it. Second area where we give advice is to monitor the disease evolution and also look at the transmission parameters during the outbreaks. Third part is to look at the duration of the outbreaks and also to look at different vaccination strategies and provide advice on which might be the most efficient one to implement into the field. And then the last one is to assess the vaccine effectiveness. So this is the vaccine efficacy into the field conditions. Let's go in the next slide with a few examples on each of these items. And I will start with the vaccination strategies, looking at different scenarios for vaccination. And this is the beauty of working with these transmission models and statistical models, because we can look at different scenarios without doing experiments, because when you are having outbreaks, there is no time, there is no possibility to do experiments into the field. So with this way, we are able to provide you scientific advice without doing that. So if we look in the first column here of this table, you can see different sampling intervals ranging from 30 days, 14 days, and just 1 week, 7 days. The second column is looking at the proportion of the animals that you will sample in a vaccinated herd. The third one is the number of farms that you will test. Here we are looking into chicken layers into the Netherlands scenarios. So that's the number of chicken laying farms into the Netherlands. And then the fourth column is on the early detection, the probability that you will detect an outbreak. So if you look at 7 days sampling interval with 100% animals that you will test, you will see in the fourth column that the probability to detect the outbreak in those vaccinated farms is 1, so 100%. If you reduce the proportion of the farms that you test to 50%, is the second last line there, you can see that the probability reduces, but is still 0.99%. And if you just test 25% of the farms every week, you still get the same 99% of probability that you will detect outbreaks in the vaccinated farms. So with this, we can give advice to risk managers how much sampling they need to do, because the more you sample, the more the cost you will have. You can even go then to other scenarios, even just the top line, sampling once a month. If you test all the farms there, you still have 92% probability to detect the outbreaks. The right column is the same, but then for the probability of freedom, because that is also very important for trade. The trade partners, they want to be sure that when you move the animals, that they are free of disease. And in vaccinated flocks, you also should be able that the animals are not infected. So here we did similar calculations to show what you can do on level of sampling to document the freedom of disease. Next slide, please. Yeah, here I can be a bit shorter because you already have seen the video on the lumpy skin disease. That's the work that we have done. So there we provided first an opinion to give advice on how the vaccination strategy could be implemented. And then we were asked also during the outbreaks to further monitor the situation. This allowed us also to update our models that we were using, because in the beginning we were using data from Israel because there were no data from Europe. We didn't have those outbreaks before. But then as the epidemic went on in Europe, we got data from the Balkan. We were able to optimize our model. For instance, we could add also into the model the component of the vectors, the insects playing a role into disease. So while we are involved, we also further optimize our scenario buildings.
Frank, can you wrap up?
Okay, I move on a bit faster then. Let's go to the next slide. Yeah, this is just another example comparing vaccinated and unvaccinated scenarios in the different animal species for avian influenza. I will go to the next one. Yeah, this is maybe also relevant just to compare different scenarios, different vaccination strategies. Again, on avian influenza, where we compared in the first row the minimum scenario in the EU regulation, so just culling. the affected, the animals on the affected farms. But then we also looked in the second scenario, what if you would also cull the animals in an area in a radius of 1 kilometer around the infected area? And then the next 3 were emergency vaccination, where you have an infected farm and then you do a ring vaccination into a distance of 1, 3, and 10 kilometers. And then you can see that the number of farms that you have infected, the duration of the epidemic, and also the number of animals that you have to cull is drastically reduced by including the vaccination. And the last scenario here, that was the preventive vaccination, what is done currently by France. It's also very efficient, but here you need to do the vaccination again and again, as you need to keep up the immune level of the different species. Let's move on. This is monitoring the vaccine effectiveness into the field, but I can refer again also to the work done in the video on lumpy skin disease. So we can move on into my last slides, where you again will see a comparison of different implementation strategies. In the first one, you just do the stamping out. So the first one is you don't do any stamping out, then the partial stamping out or the total stamping out. And then the next block is the same, but with a reactive vaccination, and the last one is the preventive vaccination. So these are scenarios that we can do upfront to guide risk managers to decide what is the most efficient way before going and implementing something. And the main message here is that, well, if you want to get rid of the lumpy skin disease outbreaks, you will need to use vaccination. The vaccination effectiveness is not that important because you can already obtain here very good results if you just have 40% vaccine effectiveness into the field. So with this, I will close. I hope I've given you very fast just a snapshot of what are the different type of advices that we can provide from EFSA side. What is relevant is to involve EFSA early on, because then we can work together with member states in preparatory work, and then we can reduce the time that we need during outbreaks to provide our scientific advice. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Franck. Alors, je donne la parole à Roxane Feller, secrétaire générale d'Animal Health Europe. Roxane, je compte sur toi pour être très stricte. Voilà, merci, parce que nous mangeons du temps pour les questions et c'est dommage. Donc, à toi la parole. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Olivier, et merci aux membres du Parlement, Sargiacomo, Benoit Cassart et Stefan Köhler. Mais je vois aussi dans la salle qu'il y a M. Andriukaitis, et ça me fait plaisir de vous revoir, M. Andriukaitis. I'll go to English now. In the first panel, we were asked 4 questions about mitigation and preparedness. Why are more and more animal disease outbreaks affecting Europe? Why is it important to deal with these animal diseases at EU level? How can we collaborate? And what role should the private sector play? I will try to answer these 4 questions in 8 minutes. But first, as soon as the slides come up, no, I'm not ERPA. 2 words maybe on Animal Health Europe. I don't need my slide for that. I should know that by heart. We represent the veterinary medicinal sector, those who produce the vaccines we're all talking about, and those also who manufacture them and develop them and research to find new vaccines where needed. Those 12 companies are supported also by 16 associations at national level, including in Germany, in France, in Belgium, and other non-EU countries like Switzerland, the UK, and Ukraine. What do we stand for? I think it's important because what we want, our vision is healthy animals across Europe. That's wishful thinking, but that's what a vision is about. So, but we have also societal values that, if we apply them directly to vaccine and vaccination, I think fit well the model of what we're talking about today. We want to make sure that our products are available to help optimize health management, also to ensure animal welfare, to safeguard public health, it was mentioned, that's zoonotic diseases, to contribute to the sustainability of food production, and also to keep companion animals free from disease, because we also manufacture and develop for companion animals and not only livestock. They're having apparently problems to find my slides, but it's okay, I can go on like that. You never received them? Well, I thought I had sent them. I got an acknowledgement, but it doesn't matter. I'll continue. Like this, you're sure to listen to me and not look at the slides. Why are there more and more disease outbreaks? I won't go over what Nancy already said. Of course, climate change is the big elephant in the room. I mean, just listening to the names of the diseases that we talked about, African swine fever, you hear the word Africa, clearly it's not European. This has to do with climate change. There's also the globalization and increase of trade and movement of people. Diseases know no borders, so this is clearly, I mean, you saw the video you finally got, Bernard, and you've made EFSA, you see that the diseases just move. You just can't say, oops, sorry, do you have your passport? No, they just go on. Also, we have emerging and re-emerging diseases. Unfortunately, with Bernard in 2001, we went through, when I was representing the farmers, having to go through the FMD crisis, the foot and mouth disease crisis, and it was absolutely horrific. Horrible, and I'm very happy with the way things are moving in Germany, meaning not moving, and the way it's been contained. Keeping my fingers crossed, don't want to send bad vibes. But this is also due and thanks to the vaccination strategy we have in Europe. It's due to the vaccinations banks that we have in Europe. It's due to the use of vaccination in Europe with our new law. Maybe there are also more and different types of disease outbreaks. I added that to my slide. I think there's sometimes inadequate biosecurity. Before I started this session, I talked to one of French farmers in the room. He will recognize wearing a red sweater in the back. He said that one of the problems is inadequate biosecurity. It is, unfortunately, it can still be seen by farmers as an extra cost. A little bit like vaccination. So it's double-edged. It's like taking an insurance. It's great when you have nothing and you didn't pay for your insurance. It's bad when you've paid for insurance and never had to use it. But when you have an insurance and you use it, then you realize how important it is. And I kind of see this as similar approach. I have 4 more minutes. The second question we were asked, why is it important to deal with animal disease at EU level? I think Mr. Cassart made some very strong statements there. I think working together, having a European legislation that coordinates, to have public health is also doesn't know frontiers, by protecting biodiversity. We could not work at EU level and beyond. So I think that's a given. I think we can all agree on this one. So it's an easy answer that we were to an easy question. Then the collaboration between national health bodies, how can that be improved? I'm not a national body. I know there's some here. I see one from Hungary. I see other people in the room. It's not easy to coordinate, because when you are hit, I imagine, by a disease, you first want to take care of your own borders. You first want to take care of what's happening in your own country. So clearly, coordination, it can happen. It does happen. I know the CVOs know each other. They have meetings. But the coordination is not so much in the dialogue, but it's also in the decisions to take. When you have a BTV3 outbreak like happened in the Netherlands, it started there, it's not going to stop there. It's a vector-borne disease. That means it's not transmitted by animals being next to each other. It's because there's a mosquito flying around and can go easily around the country affected. So I really believe that there could be maybe more coordination in taking similar decisions in deciding on, on ordering or on deciding on vaccination. We know of a country who's still hesitating 3 months later whether or not they should have a vaccine. This, I don't think, is reasonable. So I really want to encourage those CVOs responsible at national level to take the necessary measures to share very early the decisions they're going to make, and possibly decide together and make joint decisions where possible. Then, last question, what is the role the private sector should play? I consider Animal Health Europe representing one part of the private sector. We do commit to invest in research and development, like I told you, of vaccines. We were very lucky because we managed very quickly to have BTV3 vaccine available. I mean, all the ingredients were there. Some of you heard me in a previous event. I listed the ingredients. I'm not going to go through this one again. We need a good vaccine production and distribution. That's what we can do and help. We can help also with giving EU vaccine banks. We can also raise public awareness through campaigns, and we can also support the farmers during emergencies. I have 20 seconds left. What we believe, however, is that we can't take all the responsibility and the risks. Like BTV3, we didn't know which countries were going to pay their farmers for the vaccines, so we really need to make sure that we share the risk when we want to put on the market a new vaccine, and that it is not only taken by the industry. And where vaccine banks, again, is working. I believe, 30 seconds, that a good opportunity to review a few things that I've said is through the animal health law. Maybe my colleague David, who's speaking a little later, might be able to do that. But I believe, I think we can, first of all, we should differentiate between vector-borne diseases and contact diseases. I mean, for me, that's something that is not clear enough in the animal health law. So you had a saying, Nancy, and I say prevention is better than cure and preparedness is better than culling. Thank you very much, and apologies for not seeing my slides, but thank you for listening.
Bravo Roxane. On voit que tu peux travailler sans filet, c'est très bien, bravo. Hein. Tout le monde ne peut pas travailler sans slides comme cela. Voilà, eh bien nous sommes arrivés aux questions. Je vais peut-être limiter un peu le nombre de questions parce que nous sommes un peu en retard. Mais néanmoins, je voudrais déjà demander à messieurs les députés, les membres du Parlement, s'ils ont des questions à nos panélistes.
Moi, j'ai une question parce qu'on a beaucoup parlé d'anticipation. On a vu des modèles très explicites sur l'intérêt de la vaccination et l'intérêt d'une action le plus en amont possible. Le nerf de la guerre, c'est l'argent. Donc, comment fait-on pour avoir les moyens nécessaires entre les États membres et le niveau européen? Comment prévoit-on? Je sais qu'il y a une réserve de crise, mais elle est déjà tellement surutilisée, surdemandée à chaque crise sans qu'on ait vraiment de critères. L'avenir nous demande peut-être d'avoir une stratégie en la matière. Donc, comment envisagez-vous les choses du côté de la DG Santé?
Indeed, the budget is key. The budget is key for you. I'm only managing the budget that I'm given, and I can only reimburse what I'm allowed to reimburse the member states. But as I said during my presentation, at the end of last year, I was in minus 450 million euro because of reimbursement I had to do to the member states because of African swine fever and because of HPAI. So that was a lot of debt. I had to reduce the co-financing. And we hope that with the new MFF, which will be discussed during this mandate, we will be able to have more budget for veterinary issue and also maybe have access to a sort of reserve, crisis reserve that was available in the past, but you know that the Commission had used a lot of budget for other issue. And I think we need to, and the Parliament and the Council need to keep veterinary issue high on the agenda. It's key for the livelihood of the farmers. It's key to maintain a high animal health level in the EU, and we are, as a continent, one of the highest in relation to animal health when you compare it to the rest of the world. It gives the livelihood to our farmers. It allows us to export, and we want to maintain our export capacity to third country, and that you can only have when your status is high. And that's why, and Nancy mentioned it, the FMD outbreak in Germany jeopardizes a lot of export of meat and animal product and animals from Germany to the rest of the world, but also the EU. There are some third countries which have restricted the entire export from the EU. And why? It's because they want to protect themselves from foot-and-mouth disease, as we do. We also have our in our import certificate. We have also the requirements that the animals or the products should come from a country or a region which is free of foot-and-mouth disease. So third countries are applying the same rules. We apply regionalization. Regionalization is important in the EU. Without regionalization, Germany would not be able to get rid, I mean, that's not the term, but at least to export meat to the rest of the EU. And they can still do that except from the restricted area. So I think the way the animal health law is constructed, the way we are applying it in coordination between all the CVO allows smooth functioning of the internal market and consequences of animal health to be less important than if we were on our own. Thank you.
Nancy, tu veux rajouter quelque chose?
Yes, but only very shortly. I totally agree. I think in the animal health sector, we know how big the impact is of these animal diseases, but outside our sector and often from the public health perspective, they're not so well aware of the enormous effects, and especially if we have a pandemic disease again, zoonotic diseases, this can have. So we have to raise awareness on that. The other thing is, I think a lot of the funds are going to culling of animals. So if we can more optimize that, maybe using the models also EFSA is working on with vaccination, with preventive vaccination or around vaccination surveillance. There also we could make progress. And the last thing, again, prevention, raising awareness of biosecurity was mentioned already before by Roxanne, really important, and vaccination. Thank you.
Merci Nancy. Une autre question?
Oui, une petite question par rapport au zonage. Est-ce qu'une politique européenne en matière de santé animale efficace ne commencerait pas par une suppression des frontières nationales? Puisqu'aujourd'hui, on voit que quand il y a une superposition des zones, des maladies, plus les contraintes nationales, ben, on casse tout le commerce. Donc, est-ce qu'on ne devrait pas raisonner uniquement par zone en fonction des statuts sanitaires pour gérer les mouvements et ne plus tenir compte des frontières nationales qui obligent de faire des certificats, etc. Plus d'Europe, quoi. Plus d'Europe pour plus d'efficacité.
I don't think it's a question of more Europe or less Europe. It's true that in relation to movement of live animals, there are still certificates which are used when we are moving one animal from one member state to another member state. And that, indeed, in the blue tongue epidemic of this year, did create some problem. But, I mean, as Roxanne said, we need maybe in the animal health law to better differentiate the vector-borne disease from the non-vector-borne disease and see how movement of animals can take place. Blue tongue is very specific in the sense that our farmers are not yet used to blue tongue, and they will get used to it. They will get more of the serotypes. We had serotype 3. God knows how it arrived in the EU. God knows how foot-and-mouth disease arrive next to Berlin. But the consequences is that the disease will spread. The disease will spread and have impact on farmers. Livestock will be affected. But once the immunity is there, you won't see the disease anymore. And I'm sure that after my retirement, so sooner or later. We will be in the EU as they are in the US. When I was in veterinary school, blue tongue was known, was taught, and everybody, at least in my books, I had learned that it could not go higher than Barcelona. That was the limit. 40 years parallel was the limit of blue tongue. We have seen that with climate change, with adaptation probably of the virus. We have now blue tongue even up to Sweden. We will not eradicate it. You can use as much vaccination as you want. It will not change it. The virus is there and is there to stay, as it is in the US, in some part of the US, where you see the virus, and from 1 year to another, you get a little bit more livestock which is affected than the year before, but the virus is there and everybody lives with the virus. The problem is the transition between being free and being infected. Once you're infected, you have maternal immunity, you have immunity of the calf, of the mother, and you won't see the virus anymore. You won't see any effect on the livestock. But it's a transition which is difficult, sometimes very difficult for farmers, where I heard that 1/3 of the sheep flock were affected, and that's dramatic for a farmer. We want to avoid that. That's also why the vaccination is allowed. You can start vaccination. The country loses the status, but at the end of the story, it's not so important, but it's the transition between both which is important. Alors, blue tongue problem plus blue tongue, you have 26 different strains. Which strain will appear, where, when? I mean, nobody knows. So you can start vaccinating again strain 9 or 12 or 3, but it might be another one which will arrive. But how more you have infected animals, there is cross vaccination between, or cross immunity between one strain and the other. Not a lot, but enough, I think, to reduce the impact. So we are in the process of reviewing the animal health law. We know all those demands. There was a discussion last week at the level of the CVOs, where I think most of the CVO agree that we should downgrade blue tongue. I mean, leave it to the farmers, leave it to the individual member states to decide what's the policy which is the best for the farmers. We are not against vaccination, not at all. And if it helps the farmer in the future to avoid losses in their flock, it is most welcome. But we could talk for hours on blue tongue and what will happen next. But indeed, to repeat once again what Roxanne said, vector-borne disease will be high on the agenda for the next decade in the EU, and we are trying to get member states prepared. Having a vaccine bank, as Roxanne said, is of course one option, but what's the purpose at the end? Which we would do a vaccine bank against what? Strain 3? I mean, strain 3 is not needed in the Netherlands anymore. All the livestock have been infected and are now more or less immune. So it's always a question of the money. We come back to the beginning. We need more money to support the farmer in case of difficulties. And in that case of blue tongue, it's really the first year where there is this transition between being free, being infected with, in the middle, the losses for the farmers. Thank you.
Merci Bernard. Roxane, rapidement, parce
Très
que je
rapidement.
pense qu'il faut qu'on boucle le panel. Merci.
Mais pour répondre à Bernard et un de nos arguments, c'est on souhaiterait un dialogue un petit peu plus régulier aussi avec le secteur privé. Quand vous avez vos discussions avec les CVO, si de temps en temps vous pouviez étendre vos réunions, nous inviter 1 heure pour qu'on soit au courant, parce que je viens d'apprendre que bon, vous avez souhaité peut-être downgrade le BTV. Ce sont le genre de choses qui peuvent nous aider à anticiper et à nous préparer, ou pour arrêter ou pour continuer notre travail. Donc voilà, c'est juste une proposition, mais qu'on va refaire assez souvent. Merci beaucoup.
Merci Roxane. Je pense qu'on va être obligé de passer au panel suivant. Il est temps. Donc merci à nos panélistes. Bravo. J'appelle maintenant Olivier Debert, Paola De Vera, David John et Ivo Classen à venir nous rejoindre. Vous aurez les name tags du panel précédent, je pense, mais ce n'est pas grave. OK. Si vous voulez bien reprendre vos places, nous allons continuer. Nous avons une grosse assistance aussi par électronique, par Internet, avec beaucoup de représentants permanents des pays européens. Donc c'est un plaisir. Voilà, est-ce qu'on peut recommencer ? Alors le panel numéro 2 se propose de regarder un petit peu sur la préparation et la réaction, l'investissement dans les banques de vaccins, le système réglementaire, etc. Et je donne sans plus attendre la parole à Olivier Debert, qui est directeur du projet Épizocie et directeur de crise au ministère de l'Agriculture, à la DGAL. Olivier, tu as une seule slide et 8 minutes.
Merci. Merci beaucoup. Mes premiers mots seraient pour remercier nos trois, je peux dire nos trois députés européens pour avoir pris l'initiative de nous accueillir ici, directement dans cette institution, et d'horizons différents, nous avoir réunis ce matin pour parler de ce sujet très important, évidemment, des vaccins et de la vaccination dans le domaine de la santé animale. Je voudrais passer 2 messages clés en résumé de mon intervention. Le premier, c'est que les vaccins constituent des outils utiles, importants, dans la prévention de maladies animales et dans la lutte de certaines maladies animales. Ce sont des outils, 1, de qualité, 2, des outils sûrs, et 3, des outils efficaces. Tout le monde est convaincu dans cette salle, mais je veux le dire aussi avec la voix d'un pays qui a expérimenté, qui continue de mettre en place d'une façon inédite dans l'Union européenne une stratégie vaccinale concernant l'influenza aviaire hautement pathogène, et ça marche. Donc je vous le dis avec la force de l'expérience. Et le deuxième message clé, c'est de vous dire aussi que les vaccins sont un outil complémentaire. Ce n'est pas le seul outil efficace pour prévenir ou lutter contre les maladies animales. C'est un outil complémentaire. Complémentaire à quoi ? À la biosécurité. La biosécurité, c'est pour tous, quelles que soient les filières, partout et en tout temps. Alors maintenant, je vais aller sur les 3 moments de ma présentation. Et le premier moment, ce sera une seule slide, donc c'est la seconde. Et je l'ai mise simplement parce qu'il y a beaucoup de chiffres. Alors, le but de cette diapositive, c'est de marquer les esprits sur pourquoi, en France, on a décidé, je ne vais pas dire un beau jour, de partir sur la mise en place d'une stratégie vaccinale contre l'influenza aviaire hautement pathogène. Nous avons en France connu 5 vagues épizootiques majeures en matière d'influenza aviaire hautement pathogène depuis 2015. Vous avez ici le nombre de foyers par saison épizootique. Regardez que la fin, c'est-à-dire sur les 5 vagues épizootiques, combien y a-t-il eu de foyers en France ? Presque 3000. Ce chiffre est insupportable. Et en particulier à la saison 2021-2022, on a eu 1377 foyers sur 12 mois dans un seul pays d'influenza aviaire hautement pathogène. Insupportable. 1377 foyers, si vous voulez, c'est plus de foyers que l'épisode aussi historique de fièvre afteuse au Royaume-Uni, la précédente. Donc vous imaginez le traumatisme. Seconde ligne, le nombre de volailles abattues en relation avec ces foyers. Dernière ligne, 40 millions de volailles abattues. Ce chiffre est insupportable. Troisième ligne, les indemnisations en relation avec ces foyers. Vous voyez, pour ces 5 vagues épizootiques, au total, 1,6 milliard d'euros. Pas millions, milliards. Ce chiffre est insupportable. Ça fait beaucoup de raisons qui ont amené la France à se dire « ce n'est plus possible, on ne peut plus continuer à subir ». Alors évidemment, nous avons des méthodes éprouvées pour lutter contre les maladies pour les prévenir, les méthodes sanitaires, comme les dépeuplements, la surveillance, la restriction des mouvements pour que la maladie ne se diffuse pas. Mais parfois, la nature est plus forte et ces moyens sanitaires ne suffisent pas. Et si on va aller plus loin, il faut des moyens médico-sanitaires et les vaccins, quand c'est nécessaire, représentent l'outil efficace pour ça. Bref, nous avons dit, nous devons vacciner. Il faut vacciner, ça ne peut plus durer comme ça et pour différentes raisons. Je vous ai dit qu'il y a différentes raisons insupportables. Pourquoi ? L'influenza aviaire, c'est quand même une maladie zoonotique. Inutile de dire que hier, au Royaume-Uni, une personne est décédée de la grippe aviaire. Donc il y a un risque pour la santé humaine avec cette maladie. Il y a d'autres maladies qui sont un risque pour la santé humaine, pour lesquelles on a mis en place des stratégies vaccinales très efficaces. La rage, par exemple. Rappelons aussi que ces maladies-là, au-delà de l'impact sur la santé publique, ont un impact sur le moral des éleveurs. Je ne vais pas parler à la place des éleveurs, il y en a autour de la salle, dans la salle, mais évidemment, chaque matin, c'est un désarroi de savoir est-ce que je vais avoir plusieurs, quelle partie de mon cheptel va être par terre. Et ça, c'est la question de tous les jours. Les nuits sont mauvaises, donc il y a un véritable désarroi, un stress pour les éleveurs, moral, de savoir est-ce que je vais avoir un foyer ou pas, est-ce que je vais l'avoir demain, après-demain, et même si j'ai eu un foyer, est-ce que je ne vais pas en avoir un l'année prochaine ou l'année d'après. Bref, autre caractère insupportable lorsqu'on a des maladies comme l'influenza aviaire avec cette dimension-là. L'épuisement des services qui interviennent, donc les services vétérinaires de l'administration, mais également les vétérinaires de terrain, l'encadrement des éleveurs, tout ce monde-là s'épuise sur la durée avec des épisodes aussi de cette taille-là. Lorsqu'on doit abattre 40 millions de volailles, vous imaginez bien aussi que la société civile, plus que s'interroge, se pose des questions en se disant mais quand même ça fait beaucoup de chantiers d'abattage et donc il y a aussi une notion de non-acceptance, notre acceptation d'avoir autant d'abattage. Et puis, je vous l'ai dit aussi, ça fait une charge publique, une charge pour les finances qui sont très importantes, finances publiques de l'État français, mais aussi de l'Union européenne parce qu'il y a un cofinancement, et puis une charge pour les éleveurs eux-mêmes. Il y a des pertes. Tout ça nous a amené à se poser la question, nous devons vacciner, eh bien nous l'avons fait. À partir d'octobre 2023, on a mis en place une campagne de vaccination. Et la réponse à la question « et alors ?» c'est « oui, c'est bien, c'est un succès ». C'est tellement un succès que nous l'avons poursuivi encore à partir d'octobre 2024. Donc nous sommes sur notre deuxième campagne. Et c'est toujours aussi un succès, un double succès, parce que le nombre de canards, nous avons une stratégie de vaccination obligatoire des canards, le nombre de canards vaccinés est élevé, chaque année de l'ordre de 60 et quelques millions de canards vaccinés, donc c'est bien, c'est une belle couverture vaccinale. Et puis c'est aussi un succès parce que le nombre de foyers, pour la saison 2023-2024, qui est la première saison avec de la vaccination, est tombé à 10 foyers. Si vous comparez aux 400 que nous avions précédemment, en moyenne sur les vagues épizootiques, et même d'ailleurs presque 1400 une année. Bref, c'est un succès. On vous le dit, c'est un succès. Je ne vous le dis pas pour l'avenir, je vous le dis dans le passé, on peut témoigner qu'en France, nous avons mis en place cette vaccination avec une réussite et nous la poursuivons. C'était la première partie de mon intervention. Je vais poursuivre sans diapositive maintenant sur une troisième partie, les facteurs clés. En 2 minutes. Facteurs clés. Que fallait-il au préalable pour une campagne de vaccination réussie ? Mais d'abord, il fallait avoir des vaccins disponibles en qualité et en quantité. C'est le cas. C'est le cas en France et même c'est le cas en Europe. En Europe, nous avons un tissu de production en recherche et développement industriel qui nous permettent de dire que sur un certain nombre de maladies, nous disposons de vaccins en quantité et en qualité suffisante. On a un droit européen qui fait que tous les vaccins qui sont utilisés sont de qualité, sont sûrs et sont efficaces. C'est pour ça qu'ils sont autorisés. Il fallait aussi, autre facteur de succès, à mettre en place une stratégie vaccinale. Quelles espèces, où la rendre obligatoire, à partir de quel seuil, etc. Et pour ça, on avait besoin de conseils du monde scientifique, comme l'EFSA l'a rappelé tout à l'heure. Il fallait nous éclairer là-dessus. Il fallait aussi, autre facteur de succès, avoir l'adhésion des parties prenantes. Et oui, ce n'est pas une politique publique toute seule, elle n'est pas flottante et hors sol. Il fallait avoir l'adhésion de toutes les parties prenantes. Les éleveurs, bien sûr, parce que c'est contraignant la vaccination aussi, parce qu'il y a une partie de la vaccination qui est payée par les éleveurs. Le monde vétérinaire, parce que là encore, techniquement, juridiquement et financièrement, ça demande des moyens. Autre facteur nécessaire aussi en préalable, la diplomatie sanitaire, parce que quand un pays vaccine, d'autres pays vont être enclins à fermer leurs frontières en disant « s'il vaccine, c'est qu'il est dépassé, c'est qu'il est infecté, donc j'ai pas confiance, je ferme mes frontières ». Donc il a fallu faire une diplomatie sanitaire avant et pendant pour limiter les impacts. Il y a eu des impacts, mais les limiter. Et là aussi, il fallait avoir l'adhésion des filières exportatrices. On ne pouvait pas le faire contre eux parce qu'ils ont perdu des marchés. Mais dans la balance, entre, vous voyez, le milliard d'euros qui a été dépensé et une campagne qui coûte 100 millions d'euros, c'est beaucoup, mais on va dire comparé au coût des dépeuplements, c'est minime. C'est quand même un effort. Mais c'est bien en deçà de l'effort financier qui est fait lorsqu'il faut indemniser les foyers. Donc la stratégie de diplomatie sanitaire. Et puis la dernière chose, le préalable, c'est la communication. Pourquoi ? Parce qu'il faut aussi communiquer vers le grand public. Une campagne de vaccination, il faut que le grand public sache que ça a lieu. Pourquoi ? Parce qu'on se retrouve quand même avec des personnes qui se demandent ce que c'est ce vaccin. Il n'y a pas des vaccins avec ARN, il y a des anti-vax aussi dans le monde vétérinaire. Donc il fallait aussi rassurer. Et en France, on n'a eu aucun retour négatif, significatif d'associations, par exemple de consommateurs ou de particuliers qui disent mais ces vaccins, on n'aime pas, on ne va plus manger de foie gras, on ne va plus manger de magret de canard parce qu'il y a des animaux qui sont vaccinés. On n'a pas eu ça, mais il fallait bien communiquer. Et mon dernier point, qui rejoint le premier, en résumé, attention, ne pensez pas que la vaccination, c'est une baguette magique. Ce n'est pas une baguette magique. C'est un bâton robuste, utile, sûr et de qualité qui nous permet, avec la biosécurité, de marcher plus loin, de marcher plus longtemps. D'accord ? Seule la vaccination, ce n'est pas le remède miracle. Il faut en plus, en complément, la biosécurité. Et voilà, c'était mon dernier point.
Merci beaucoup, Olivier. Merci pour cette brillante et très claire intervention. Je suis sûr qu'il y aura beaucoup de questions. J'en aurai une d'ailleurs. Je passe tout de suite la parole à Paola De Vella. Merci Paola de aussi respecter les 8 minutes. À vous. Et pardon, Paola, je ne vous ai pas présenté. Donc vous êtes Senior Policy Advisor à Copa Cogeca. Pardon de l'omission.
Thank you very much. I will do my intervention in English, if everyone agrees. So, well, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation to this event. As the chair was mentioning, my name is Paola De Vera. I'm Senior Policy Advisor in Copa Cogeca, representing EU farmers and agri-cooperatives. And today, I think as everyone addressed already, we come to discuss a critical issue that impacts our ability to respond to health crises and future pandemics and epidemics. And I would say for both humans and animals, but probably today we're focusing more on animals. So we need to address how can we better prepare and respond through investment on vaccines and vaccine banks. This is the topic of this panel, to increase our collective responsiveness. I will start not with the vaccines as such, but with another topic that is quite related and can be tackled through vaccination, which is antimicrobial resistance. So we know that this is one of the most pressing global challenges we have now, as I said, for both humans and animals. And this threat not only undermines our ability to treat infections in humans, but also threatens animal health and the environment. We need to work in a context of One Health in this regard. And the reality of this problem of antimicrobial resistance makes it more urgent that we focus on prevention more than on treatment. Vaccines in this regard are one of the most effective tools we have to prevent disease outbreaks and control them, and by extension reduce the need of using antibiotics. That's the fact. But and then it's clear that if we put on the table efforts to improve global health security, not just in Europe, vaccines will play a huge role in both preparation and response to these kind of problems, kind of situations. As we've seen with recent pandemics and also animal health outbreaks, the ability to respond to these emerging health threats is significantly improved when we have the vaccines available or readily available, or we are fast in developing these vaccines. But of course, for these vaccines to be part of our response, we must address also the barriers that may slow approval, production, authorization, etc., etc., etc. It's a huge process. It's not just a matter of producing a vaccine. You need to ensure that that vaccine arrives to the proper place that it should be applied. And in this regard, regulatory processes are crucial to ensuring safety, efficacy, and we also need to find ways to speed up the authorization and approval process without, of course, compromising the scientific standards that should remain at the core, of course. So if we harmonize the regulatory frameworks, we can reduce delays and unnecessary administrative burdens, and then we allow these vaccines to reach the point they should. When we talk about vaccine banks, European production capacity is an important matter in this regard. We need to be more than self-sufficient to produce these kind of vaccines to tackle the problems that we have in our territories. We will need to know exactly when the labs and the producers are ready to produce the strain that we need, as it is determined by the disease and by the institutions when this problem is tackled, and to understand the capacity, so how many doses can be produced and how quickly can they be developed. In essence, we should implement, I will call it in a provocative manner, a stress test on production level. Sorry to be provocative in that regard. So, because it's not just having the vaccine or the bank, it's the ability to start production. So I think that's very, very important for us. This is a proactive approach from our perspective, and it's essential to have true preparedness in the EU. Equally important, we need to, now I turn to the vets, we need to have trained professional people that can administer these vaccines effectively. And in the case of an epidemic, it's not just about having the vaccine that works, but having, let's say, a corps of trained veterinarians that are ready to act and apply these vaccines in a timely manner. So to that end, we need a well-prepared veterinary workforce in the EU, public, private, as much as we can, so we can ensure that we are not having, again, as it was mentioned, another foot and mouth disease outbreak as it was in 2001. I think that's a very good example of what we should avoid. This highlights in general the broad need for vaccine safety and coordinated response across the EU. Also, we feel that it's important, as I mentioned, it's not just the public investment, it's also the private investment in production of vaccines. We need to prepare for future threats, ensuring that we have robust investments in vaccine development. And for this, we must de-risk these investments through measures, public-private, this is a very complicated word, sorry. Public-private partnerships, PPPs, tax incentives, guaranteed purchase agreements, these kind of things, economic things. So then we can provide financial security needed to encourage innovation, which is also at the core of this, ensuring that the vaccines are available not for today, but also for the future. This all also, I would say in general, calls for a stronger cooperation between all the actors involved, from the pharmaceutical companies to the farmers, to the researchers, to institutions. Only together we will move forward faster enough to actually be able to tackle safely and in a proper manner this kind of outbreaks, epidemics, pandemics, as I mentioned, not only for animals. And by pooling resources and expertise, we can create a system where these vaccines are ready for deployment. So, of course, a key question that I think will be raised is whether vaccination should be mandatory or incentive-based. I think that's a key question, a hot question right now. We feel that while mandatory vaccination may be necessary for certain high-risk situations, a broader approach that includes also incentives can be equally effective. This approach has been already seen in the EU. We know some cases, especially to make progress through the reduction of use of antibiotics. Adopting preventive measures, as also my colleague from the French ministry was mentioning, is not just vaccination, it needs to go hand in hand with biosecurity. That's really, really important, it's crucial to also reduce the need of treatments. And then we address, as I mentioned, particularly antimicrobial resistance at its core. Then, again, just maybe to end a bit, to stress the need of broader shared responsibility on responding to these health threats and to work together. And yeah, I would say as a conclusion that, as we all know, vaccines are key to preparedness, key to have a quick response, and if we take the necessary steps now, we can protect human, animal, and environmental health and build a healthier future for everyone. Thank you.
Merci Paola pour cette présentation avec beaucoup de propositions intéressantes qui pourront peut-être être reprises dans les questions. Je passe la parole à David John, Senior Technical Manager à Animal Health Europe. Merci David aussi de penser au temps. Tu as la parole.
Pardon. Thank you very much for the invitation to join this panel. I will skip over the first couple of slides. My colleague Roxanne Feller in the first panel went through this briefly orally. And the next one, please, as to who Animal Health Europe is. And the next, please. So, one of the questions is, should the regulatory processes be reviewed to speed up vaccine approval and production? And I think for the normal vaccine development, generally, the EMA is fine, but I think Ivo would agree with me, there's always room for improvement in any system. However, often with disease outbreaks, we're talking about emergency development. We don't have the time. That's emergency and exceptional use. And in the veterinary regulation, there's two possibilities. There's Article 25, which is a European exceptional use authorization. And unfortunately, because that involves all the member states, that tends to be much less flexible and much slower. Which is why generally, and we saw this with the BTV3 vaccines, they're done under Article 110, which is a national decision. That is much more flexible. You're only dealing with one authority, and that also tends to be faster. Yeah, they're much more responsive to their needs. Going forwards, I think there are things that will improve the situation and help. We now have the platform technology master file, and we've seen the first of those actually authorized. And that will have the advantage in dealing with an emergency situation whereby part of the work is already done. It's being assessed. So it's only the antigen that is added that would need the further assessment. And I think we also need to look at how we can use the multi-strain dossiers in emergency situations. This wasn't really foreseen in the new regulation, but we've heard from the farmers, with BTV3, they also would like to vaccinate against the other strains of blue tongue. But it means they have to have the vet out a second time, which increases the costs, the work, and everything else. And so I think that's one area we could improve. And also on production, the production side, we need the earliest possible decisions on vaccination. What we're going to vaccinate, how many animals. And we all saw it with the COVID pandemic. Initially, there was a big problem with getting sufficient supplies of the vaccine as the companies ramped up their production to meet that need. So the earlier we can start that production, the better. And the next slide, please. And how do we de-risk this investment? Paul mentioned de-risking. And I think part of that is ensuring the coordination at the EU level. So we know on a European level what will be needed. We need, as Roxanne alluded to, this regular and early dialogue between industry and the authorities, the Commission, the CVOs. What is the thinking? Are we thinking which diseases are going to arrive? Will we vaccinate against them if they do? So it gives the companies an idea of the risk they're going to be running if they decide to develop. And linked to that, the decision on the vaccine use as early as possible. You know, the sooner we know, the sooner we can start either developing a new vaccine or producing an existing vaccine to meet the need. And the use of antigen and vaccine banks can play a big part in that de-risking, particularly where you're looking at diseases that aren't yet in Europe, but may arrive soon. You know, we saw it with lumpy skin disease. We watched that for many years move up through Africa, through the Middle East, Turkey, and it arrived in Greece. You know, perhaps we should have started work earlier, thought this is going to arrive, set up the vaccine bank, had the vaccines authorised in Europe and available in that bank, ready to use. And that could be a way forward for future diseases, outbreaks. And the next, please. So, with the antigens and vaccine banks, is there a room for cooperation? And I think it's not, is there room for, there has to be cooperation. You know, to enable the smooth running of a vaccine bank, you need good cooperation between the authorities who are running the bank and the companies producing those vaccines to make sure they're available when they need to be. And as I said, that can help de-risk the development if you know there is going to be a market for your vaccine. You know, the development of a vaccine takes many years, costs tens of millions of euros, and so at the end of the day, you need a market to sell it. If there is no market, you're not going to produce. So having a vaccine bank where you will say, yes, if you develop a vaccine, we will buy however many doses, that helps to de-risk. And next, please. And to the question of promoting large-scale vaccination, mandatory incentives, that's not really a decision for a company, but I think it is disease and situation dependent. As Paola said, for some high-risk diseases, certain situations, you know, mandatory may be necessary. For others, you know, voluntary. And it's a decision for the European and national authorities. But what is important is coordination and dialogue with all the stakeholders. So the manufacturers of the vaccines, you know, that tells us how much you're going to need, how much vaccine do you want and when, and we can tell you, you know, if that's possible, you know, how long it will take us. With the vets, are there enough vets available to do the vaccination? Do they have all the equipment they need? And I know one thing that was done in the Danish did a sort of epidemic preparedness exercise, and they discovered actually the shortage they had was rubber gloves for the vets. They didn't have enough in stock. So it can be the simplest things. And then finally, for the farmers, you know, do the farmers want the vaccination? You know, there are trade implications, workload issues, so it's important to include the farmers as well. And I think for everybody, you know, the earliest decisions possible, really, to help drive things forward. Next slide, please. And the next part. So it's our 3 R's. I think you've heard these before. So regular dialogue, rapid and early decisions, and risk sharing for efficient use of the resources. So thank you very much.
Thank you, David. And now I introduce Ivo Claessen. Ivo Claessen il est directeur exécutif adjoint de l'Agence européenne du médicament et aussi responsable évidemment des médicaments vétérinaires. Donc Ivo, merci d'être là et nous attendons avec impatience ta présentation. Tu as la parole.
Thank you much, Olivier, and thanks for the organizers for organizing this meeting and inviting me, because I think it's a really important meeting, bringing together the different viewpoints on vaccination. Let me start with the good message first. We have the toolbox. The regulatory toolbox to authorize vaccines, even under emergency situations, is there. And I know, David, everything can be faster, but let's assume that we do it as fast as possible. And there is a distinct difference between an Article 110 authorization for use, so it's not a marketing authorization per se, and the Article 25, which is a marketing authorization, and if done by the European Medicines Agency, it's for the entire Union. So vaccines can be used in every member state if the need is there under emergency situations. So that was my first message. My second message is that with the new veterinary regulation, the 2019/6 regulation, which became applicable in 2022, that basis for responding to emergency situations has expanded, and there's a few slides in there, but I think the key message is here that with the vaccine antigen platform master file, the vaccine antigen master file, multi-strain dossier, and the different articles, we do have the tools, and I will give the information in some slides on that, that allow us to, or allow the industry to prepare better, and us to respond faster in an emergency situation. I think these are important things. And the last message is that 2024 has actually been a very interesting year, because in 2024, we have used all those tools. So for the first time, since the new regulation went live, all these tools have been used in order to respond also to crises that are ongoing, avian influenza, blue tongue vaccines, and others. So I think that's a key message that's important for this area. I've also listened to the other speakers and saying vaccines alone can never do the job. There's always has to be biosecurity. There are implications of the use of vaccines on trade issues. I think that's why it is important to also look at the vaccines as an essential element in this, but not the only element. And that's what we do as well. Our role is to judge quality and safety of the vaccines. And in emergency situations, we weigh the risk of not having all the data available. The regulation allows us to do that, against the benefit of having a vaccine available to deal with that specific situation. So we can say normally we would require a full data package, which we know is not there. And to say this is a risk benefit for this product is such that it can be used safely everywhere under all circumstances. In an emergency situation, however, we can say the situation is such that we can balance the benefit of having a vaccine available for that specific situation against the risk of not having all the data available. And that's what we've been doing. And in discussions that we have been having it with the network and in CVMP, we asked ourselves, what can we do more to accelerate access to the market of these vaccines? And my intervention in that situation has been, and I've learned from the experience I had when I was a CVMP member in 2005, when we had to also judge HPAI vaccines, H5 vaccines, where rather than coming up with a list of questions, we said, let's take the decision now, because bringing a list of questions to the marketing authorization holders will delay the availability of this product in an emergency situation. And we can take a decision now on that risk-benefit analysis. And that's exactly what we've done in 2024 on the avian influenza vaccine that was presented to us, and recently also for the blue tongue vaccines, where in January we've given a positive opinion on 2 blue tongue vaccines. Speed is a relative thing. One we did in 3 months' time, and the other one in 4 months' time. So I agree it's not as fast as a national authorization for use, but on the other hand, it's much faster than the normal process would take. And I think it's revolutionary that the agency, in collaboration with CVMP and the network, can take decisions at this speed. I think the 3 months is probably an absolute minimum, unless we go through the same things as COVID, where they had rolling reviews and where the whole focus was on getting these vaccines available. So Olivier, you may have noticed that I'm not using any of the slides that I had prepared.
I noticed.
I think all the information is in the slides. They're happy for them to be distributed. But I think this message is more important than going through some technical slides and bringing in regulations and articles, etc. For me, the only way out here is to ensure that there's good communication, CVO network, the network of the regulatory authorities, national competent authorities. I'm really impressed with a presentation that the French colleague gave, and I've been following that very closely because I think it's very courageous what France has done in starting massive rollout of a vaccination program. I know that the logistics behind it have been a nightmare in organizing the veterinarians to do the vaccination, the monitoring, the serological monitoring, etc. And it's still an ongoing process. But it's an experience that the whole union can learn from on how to do it. And as you've shown, it's been extremely effective in bringing down the number of infections and saving the economy. So with that, I would like to close my presentation. I think it's well within time, Olivier, and over to you again.
Merci beaucoup Ivo, et puisque tu nous as gagné un peu de temps, je pense que c'est vraiment important effectivement de signaler que certains des outils mis en place dans la législation, en particulier tout ce qui considérait les plateformes vaccinales, on en a eu 2 maintenant qui ont été certifiés assez récemment, et c'est vraiment un point important à peut-être mettre en balance avec les banques de vaccins, parce que les plateforme apporte une flexibilité énorme par rapport aux changements qu'on peut avoir. Les banques sont statiques. Donc peut-être un point de discussion un peu plus tard. Mais on va passer aux questions, si vous le voulez bien, et je vais profiter de mon privilège de modérateur pour en poser une directement à Olivier. Olivier, si c'était à refaire la vaccination HPI, est-ce que vous feriez pareil?
Clairement non. Non, on ne ferait pas pareil, on le ferait beaucoup plus tôt. Et je vais profiter d'une réponse courte pour faire un résumé sous forme de slogan en moins de 10 mots. Biosecurity is security, vaccination is protection, and together is stronger.
Bon, c'était pas préparé du tout. Hein. Très bien. Messieurs les députés, je suis sûr que vous avez des questions. Monsieur Cassart.
Oui, je vous avoue que je reste un peu sur ma faim quand j'entends on a les boîtes à outils, ceci, cela, tout va bien, il y a des plateformes, c'est souple et tout. Moi, très concrètement, sur le terrain, je vois une chose, par exemple le vaccin MHE, il est reconnu en France, il est reconnu pour passer d'une zone indemne à d'une zone infectée à une zone indemne. Il est reconnu, j'entends dire, d'une certaine manière en Belgique, mais on ne peut pas importer en Belgique sur base de la réglementation européenne. Alors, très clairement, est-ce que dans le cadre des mises à disposition des vaccins et de la distribution de ces vaccins, on ne pourrait pas avoir une autorité de référence? C'est un peu poser la même question que tantôt. Est-ce qu'on ne devrait pas se reposer sur l'Europe pour que ça aille beaucoup plus vite? Si le vaccin est efficace, on peut l'utiliser, on peut certifier sur sa base. Et tant qu'il n'est pas reconnu pour ça, on n'est nulle part quelque part.
Oui, je vous entends, et peut-être Ivo, tu auras à cœur de répondre à cela. Il y a pour ajouter un peu de poil à gratter, Ivo, quand même, la crise grippe aviaire est arrivée en 2021. Le premier vaccin autorisé avec la souche circulante de virus l'a été en 2024, si je ne me trompe pas. Donc il s'est écoulé quand même beaucoup de temps. Alors qu'est-ce qu'on peut améliorer aussi? Bon, je rajoute à votre question, monsieur le député, mais je pense qu'il y a peut-être effectivement, comme le suggérait David, des choses à changer, le cas échéant. Ivo.
I'm not sure I'm the right person to address it, but I can give you my views on it. So what happened between 2021 and 2024? When we had the avian influenza outbreaks, and Frank Verdonk already explained on the actions taken by EFSA, a group was established looking at vaccines as an intervention in HPAI outbreaks and the different scenarios that could be involved there. The agency was involved, but it was based on theoretical, let's say, theoretical vaccines, because we didn't have the right vaccines for the epidemiological situation. I think important to say that the H5N1 strain that is circulating in Europe could not be matched with the epidemiological relevant strain, except for vaccines that maybe were available outside of Europe. And there's specific rules for that, and that one of the vaccines used now in France is also one of those vaccines that were available. We did a survey as agency amongst marketing authorization holders on whether they had vaccines, what sort of information they had, whether there was an intent to bring those vaccines to Europe, and offering our support in having pre-submission meetings with them to look at where they are. We cannot force marketing authorization holders to say submit your dossier to us and then evaluate it and make it available. And in that sense, Article 110 can make that exception, but only for a single member state. So the vaccine that's currently used in France, which is used in ducks primarily, has an authorization for use in France alone. And if you want to import it into Belgium, or you want to use the same type of vaccines for ducks, presumably, you would need to convince your chief veterinary officer that he will give that exemption based on the data. The other question, which I think is an interesting question, is about vaccine banks and about preparedness and how can you prepare, and that links very much into having surveillance on what is coming our way. Lumpy skin disease was mentioned, which we could have probably been preparing for better. On the human side, that is a responsibility of the Health Emergency Response Authority, established during COVID, where there is a preparedness for AMR as well, and they can stockpile medical countermeasures. Let's call them that way. So it could be vaccines or other medicinal products, and they are, as I understand it, in a sort of contract situation with some member states, not all of them, that in the case of an emergency they can supply quite rapidly from those areas. On the veterinary side, there's nothing of the sort, as far as I'm aware. So vaccine banks are largely a national responsibility, and it's contracts with marketing authorization holders that keep stocks of the antigens and that can formulate them into vaccines in a pretty short time. So the systems are there, but not at the pan-European level. And since we all know that infectious diseases, in principle, have no boundaries, certainly not with animals where there's a lot of trade, I think there could be a reason for doing that. But it's not our responsibility to organize that. So I don't know where to put that, Olivier. Thank you.
J'espère que ça a à peu près répondu à votre question, monsieur le député.
Non, pas trop. J'aime les choses claires et carrées. Non, ma question, c'était simplement, est-ce qu'on ne devrait pas mettre en place une autorité unique au niveau européen qui, en même temps, valide un produit, valide sa commercialisation et valide sa certification pour les échanges intracommunautaires? C'est très... Maintenant, on peut dire, on n'y est pas, mais on aimerait y arriver. On peut... Mais... Voilà,
on n'y est pas. Sur la question spécifique du vaccin maladie hémorragique en France, je demandais à Olivier, malheureusement, ni lui ni moi ne sommes conscients de son statut. Je pense que c'est une autorisation provisoire, ce que les Français appellent une ATU. Et dans ces conditions, effectivement, la reconnaissance mutuelle est impossible, je crois, ou très compliquée. C'est donc effectivement l'obstacle existant, mais votre appel, je crois, est très bien reçu, parce qu'il est important, effectivement, les différences en matière de traitement des maladies à l'intérieur des États membres, c'est compliqué.
Vaccins, les maladies et les vaccins, et la combinaison de ces stratégies différentes entre États membres, ça complique terriblement les choses. Et ce n'est pas un reproche que je fais à personne. Je dis il faut qu'on évolue vers plus d'harmonisation et de synchronisation. C'est mon appel aujourd'hui.
Voilà, bon, on verra au troisième panel, la Commission reviendra et peut-être pourra commenter sur les modifications à la loi de santé animale. Autre question de la part du... Allez-y.
Je vais reprendre la parole, parce qu'il a été beaucoup question de grippe aviaire. En venant des Landes, ça me donne quelques souvenirs. Vous dites qu'on ferait autrement aujourd'hui, j'espère, parce qu'il nous a fallu 5 vagues, avec des coûts financiers pour l'État astronomiques, un coût social pour les éleveurs. C'est vraiment au pied du mur qu'on a fini par réagir et à imposer la vaccination. Et je crois qu'il ne faut pas oublier les freins psychologiques qui existent à la vaccination et qui vont de pair avec les freins financiers sur la capacité qu'on a à exporter. Donc c'est vrai que moins on perd de temps, et de ce côté-là, avoir un système pan-européen comme le propose Benoit Cassart, à l'évidence, ce serait le chemin à prendre. Mais oui, d'abord, ce n'est pas une baguette magique, comme vous l'avez dit, mais mon Dieu qu'on a perdu du temps.
Merci. Madame, au fond.
Thank you for all the invaluable information, first of all. So, as a veterinarian, I would like to approach from a different angle and ask for the types of the vaccine, because there are various types of vaccines for all the diseases that we were talking about. So, I was wondering, do you think it's also important to create a unity for the types of vaccines that we are applying as veterinarians in the field, because as it may also potentially have some immunity or economic outcomes, economic differences on the field, I was wondering.
So to whom would you like to address your question?
Whoever can address.
So, okay, I'll try and answer that. It's a difficult one. I think we have different types of vaccine for different situations. We have the inactivated, we have some live attenuated, we have the vector vaccines. And at the end of the day, all the vaccines meet the standards set in Europe for quality, safety and efficacy. It's the decision of the companies and the experts developing those vaccines, what is the best method to produce that level of safety and efficacy that is needed to give the right protection and to get that vaccine into the animal in an efficient manner. So for some animals, if you're talking cattle, injection, there's not that many cattle on one farm, injection is acceptable. If you're talking about poultry with 20, 30,000 birds, you can't inject every bird, so you look at other approaches, some of the nasal sprays, droplets, water, etc. And so that, I think, is why we have that variety of types of vaccine. It's to try and produce the right protection in the best manner possible.
Ivo, tu veux intervenir, vas-y.
Maybe to add on that, classically we had live vaccines, attenuated live vaccines, inactivated vaccines, and subunit vaccines. But the vaccine field is moving as well. There's a lot of innovation ongoing. We see indeed the vaccine platforms. We see DNA vaccines, RNA vaccines, new delivery systems, particularly for the mRNA vaccines. It could be nanoparticles, new adjuvants, new immunomodulators. So each suitable for a specific situation, I would say. So it also depends on whether you need a rapid onset of immunity, which is very important during an outbreak situation, or whether you're aiming for long duration of immunity, which will be more beneficial with long-lived livestock. So I would say there's not a single answer to your question. Oh.
Merci Ivo. Mélanie, une question?
Oui, merci. Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Donc, Mélanie Lamaison d'Aliénor. Nous sommes une agence en affaires publiques et je prends ici la parole au nom d'Eurofoie Gras, la Fédération européenne du foie gras, pour appuyer, je dirais, les propos de Monsieur Debar sur le fait que la vaccination, effectivement, en France des canards a été une réussite. Alors, bien évidemment, comme Monsieur Debar l'a expliqué, il s'agit d'un outil dans la boîte à outils, mais un outil fondamental et qui vient en complément des mesures de biosécurité. Et Dieu sait que c'est important de bien appliquer ces mesures de biosécurité. Selon nous, cette réussite montre qu'en fait, pour être vraiment efficace, au niveau européen, il faudrait une généralisation de cette vaccination obligatoire qui passerait évidemment par un accompagnement financier des instances européennes, publiques, nationales et régionales, et qui passerait également par un renforcement de la diplomatie sanitaire, vous en avez parlé, afin d'éviter une fermeture des marchés à l'export. Donc ma question est la suivante, je ne sais pas qui c'est qui souhaiterait y répondre, mais que pensez-vous de cette idée de vaccination obligatoire des canards, combinée encore une fois avec un appui technique, financier et un renforcement de la diplomatie sanitaire? Merci.
Oui, moi ? D'accord, merci. Alors, ça a été dit tout à l'heure, cette maladie, l'influenza aviaire, est présente en Europe, mais les pays, dans le cadre de la réglementation européenne, restent libres d'imposer de façon obligatoire ou facultative une vaccination. Sur quelles espèces? En France, on a une production de foie gras, donc on a fait le canard. Mais peut-être que d'autres pays feront les dindes et un troisième pays fera les poules pondeuses, par exemple. Donc ça dépend aussi du pays. On l'a dit tout à l'heure, c'est pays dépendant. Même s'il y a une harmonisation, je vous prie vraiment de croire qu'il y a une harmonisation au niveau européen dans les textes. Et puis ça dépend de la situation. En France, on avait 400 foyers, on est monté à 1400. Il était nécessaire de changer de braquet, de changer de paradigme, d'aller au-delà de simplement le sanitaire. D'autres pays, s'ils n'ont que quelques foyers, ils vont peut-être pas investir dans une stratégie vaccinale qui va leur faire perdre des marchés à l'exportation, par exemple. Ils vont faire la balance aussi. D'accord ? Nous, la balance était claire en France. Ça devenait insupportable, il fallait changer. Donc voilà, donc il appartient aux États membres, mais s'ils le font, ils le font dans un cadre harmonisé européen, typiquement pour la vaccination aviaire. Le texte européen dit que ça ne peut être qu'un vaccin inactivé. Le européen dit que ça ne peut être qu'un vaccin qui permet de différencier les anticorps post-vaccinaux des anticorps post-infectieux. Et je peux continuer le cadre européen. Donc il y a vraiment un cadre, mais c'est vrai que la décision de quand vacciner, est-ce que c'est toute l'année ou c'est qu'à une saison? C'est quelles espèces? Le mode de financement, ça appartient au pays. Et franchement, je peux imaginer que quelques pays disent « moi j'en ai très peu, j'arrive à le gérer par les moyens habituels et donc je ne vais pas sur une stratégie vaccinale obligatoire, peut-être facultative ». Voilà, donc ça dépend, mais il y a franchement un cadre. Sur l'impact à l'export, des pays tiers, effectivement, ferment leurs frontières sur toute ou partie de la production issue d'un pays qui vaccine. En France, c'est pour ça que la vaccination est rendue obligatoire, sauf si les animaux ou les produits de ces animaux sont destinés à être exportés. Dans ce cas-là, la vaccination est facultative, parce qu'on sait que les pays tiers certains n'accepteront pas des animaux vaccinés. Alors, qu'est-ce qui est fait là-dessus? C'est même, donc déjà, c'est au niveau européen, mais c'est même au-delà du niveau européen, ce qui est fait, c'est au niveau d'une organisation internationale qui s'appelle l'Organisation mondiale de la santé animale, l'OMSA, qui a son siège à Paris, ça s'appelait l'OIE avant. Et cette OMSA, de concert avec l'ensemble de la planète, et en particulier avec la Commission européenne et ses États membres, sont très actifs pour convaincre les autres États du monde que la vaccination ne doit pas, lorsqu'elle a lieu et lorsqu'elle est nécessaire, ne doit pas conduire à des entraves commerciales. Et ce que je dis là, ce n'est pas une intention, c'est clairement inscrit dans le marbre d'une résolution de la fameuse OMSA en mai 2022 de mémoire, actée par l'ensemble des pays. Alors, c'est une résolution, donc certains s'en dispensent un petit peu. Par exemple, les États-Unis d'Amérique ont fait un embargo assez large sur la production de volailles française et même un peu plus large européen. Ils l'ont allégé récemment. Ils l'ont levé pour partie, parce qu'il y a une diplomatie sanitaire qui a eu lieu. Donc, oui, c'est engagé au niveau européen, évidemment, mais même au-delà du niveau européen, grâce à cette fameuse Organisation mondiale de la santé animale, qui a plus de 100 ans d'existence et une grande légitimité.
Merci Olivier. Nous allons conclure ce panel parce qu'il est temps de... Désolé, mais il faut passer à la suite. Je veux laisser aussi du temps aux questions pour le troisième panel. Donc merci beaucoup à tous. Et j'appelle maintenant Louis Perrault pour le troisième panel, Madame Fabienne Niger. Barbara, je crois que vous êtes volontaire pour remplacer Francisco. Et Montserrat, s'il vous plaît, merci de venir. Merci à vous. Allez, on y va. Je pense que nous avons 3 honorables membres du Parlement dans la salle, peut-être 4 bientôt. Ah voilà, 4, donc on peut y aller. C'est donc mon plaisir d'introduire le panel 3 qui sera sur les questions sociétales, financières, etc. Et sans plus attendre, je donne la parole à Louis Perrault, qui est Senior Advisor chez Hendrick Genetics, donc une entreprise de sélection de volailles, et surtout président de l'Association européenne des volailles rurales. Louis, tu as la parole et je te demanderai aussi de faire attention au temps comme tout le monde. Merci, à toi.
Merci Olivier. Effectivement, AIRPA, je suis président de cette association et c'est un peu les volailles qu'on pointe du doigt dès qu'il y a un problème. Vous savez, celles qui sont dehors et elles ont porté pendant toutes ces périodes-là une forte pression de la part de la profession avec juste raison. Mais je ne suis pas venu vous parler de ça, je suis venu vous parler de la façon dont on a perçu de notre côté, si on peut avancer sur le slide suivant, l'influenza, l'évolution de cette crise que l'on a traversée. En fait, au départ, effectivement, monsieur le député l'a bien précisé, il y avait une demande forte des professionnels pour enclencher la vaccination. C'était, on l'a dit, Olivier Debert l'a rappelé, c'est des traumatismes considérables et des coûts énormes. Suivante, s'il vous plaît. Mais il y a quelque chose qu'il faut comprendre. Pourquoi on n'y est pas allé aussi vite qu'on l'aurait souhaité? D'abord, il faut être honnête, et je crois qu'Olivier ne pourra pas contredire, les vaccins n'étaient pas tout à fait prêts, parce que c'est un marché assez restreint, le canard d'une façon générale, et les vaccins ne sont pas simples à établir pour cette souche-là qui est particulière. Donc ça, c'est un premier point. Le deuxième, c'est que nous, en tant que professionnels, que je représente, sélectionneurs, on n'avait aucune envie de se voir fermer 60% de notre chiffre d'affaires. Voilà, il faut comprendre ça. Donc ça a été un frein pendant longtemps. On représente, la France est le premier et le seul pays à exporter de la génétique au monde à enclencher la vaccination. Le seul, il n'y en a pas d'autres. Il y a plein d'autres pays qui vaccinent dans le monde, mais aucun qui exporte de la génétique. Donc c'est vrai qu'on a ouvert une porte et de belle façon. Donc 100 pays tiers, on représentait à peu près, on estimait qu'il y avait 40% de ces pays qui risquaient de fermer si, slide suivante s'il vous plaît, si on n'enclenchait pas ce qui était un nouveau mot que vous avez employé, Olivier Debert, avec juste raison, diplomatie sanitaire. Je pense qu'il a trouvé sa raison d'être à ce moment-là. Effectivement, c'est devenu un point important avec l'obligation de se dire on vaccine, d'accord, mais on exporte. Et ça a été vraiment un énorme travail auquel l'ensemble de la représentation de nos autorités vétérinaires sanitaires françaises ont planché, ont travaillé de concert avec les professionnels, certes, mais avec une efficacité à toute épreuve. Et je dois dire qu'il y a quelque chose qu'on a oublié de dire aussi, c'est qu'il y a quelque chose qui nous a aidés, c'est l'acte délégué européen qui précisait un certain nombre de cadres dans lesquels il fallait rentrer et aller en vaccination, c'est-à-dire avoir un vaccin d'IVA et du monitoring. Et je pense que ce cadre-là a permis aussi d'être plus efficace sur la diplomatie sanitaire. Donc c'est des points importants qu'il faut bien avoir en tête. S'il vous plaît, suivant. En fait, ce qu'il faut comprendre aussi, c'est qu'il y a un certain nombre de pays qui mettent des embargos dès qu'on a une crise influenza sur un territoire, hein, mais il y a d'autres, et ce n'est pas les mêmes, qui vont mettre un embargo si on vaccine. C'est assez... voilà. Le seul qui fait les deux, c'est le Japon. Le Japon qui est le seul qui a, dans son certificat, clairement spécifié le pays qui vaccine ne peut pas exporter, etc. Les pays que vous avez sous les yeux sont les seuls qu'on a contenus, finalement, après cette diplomatie sanitaire mise en place, ce qui est assez remarquable. On est passé de ces 40% qu'on estimait à si peu de pays, en fait. Donc le Japon, la Corée du Sud, la Thaïlande, pour des raisons commerciales uniquement, c'est parce que la Thaïlande exporte de la viande au Japon et que le Japon bloque si ça vient de France, etc. Les USA, on en a parlé, et le Canada. Suivant. Donc en fait, et là merci Olivier Debert de cette présentation, je reprends juste ces chiffres-là, c'est les millions qui ont été, qu'on a pu éviter justement en impliquant la vaccination. On passe parce que de toute façon ça a été largement évoqué et très bien expliqué. Suivant. Il reste quand même quelque chose sur la question du coût de la vaccination. Certes, sur la vaccination uniquement de l'espèce palmipède, j'entends les palmipèdes à foie gras, mais il y a aussi des palmipèdes maigres qui sont importants aussi dans la production française. C'est 100 millions, grosso modo 105 millions d'euros, la vaccination. Et l'État français a aidé à la mise en place de cette vaccination avec une prise en charge de 85% la première année, 15% pour les professionnels. Et puis, on sait que ça va évoluer. Donc, c'est en 2025, 70% du coût est pris en charge. 2026, certainement moins. Et en fait, ce qu'il faut bien comprendre, c'est que dans ce coût général, le monitoring représente 40%. Attention, le monitoring post-vaccinal, pas celui qui est en place pour contrôler les épidémies éventuelles qui peuvent arriver sur le territoire. Non, celui-là, il est déjà, il n'est pas dans ce coût-là. Là, c'est juste le monitoring obligatoire et indispensable pour pouvoir exporter aussi sur les animaux vaccinés. Hein, si les animaux sont vaccinés, on va les contrôler une fois par mois, ça a été dit, sur tous les troupeaux pour vérifier qu'ils sont bien porteurs uniquement du vaccin, du virus vaccinal et pas du virus sauvage. Ça, c'est un coût de 40%. Suivant. Ce qui représente, alors, si on donne, ce n'est pas les 40% en question, mais si on voit ce que ça coûte pour les producteurs, même avec la prise en charge de l'État qui est remarquable, hein, 2024, c'est 5% du coût de la viande, en plus uniquement lié à ce qui reste aux professionnels. 2025, 10%, ça c'est pour la partie production de viande. 2025, on sait que ce sera plus. Et là-dessus, il y a un risque de non-compétitivité vis-à-vis des autres pays qui produisent le même type de viande. Et ça crée quelque part un petit souci. La suivante. En fait, je reviens sur ce qu'a dit tout à l'heure Mélanie Lamaison, si on prend en compte le coût général de la vaccination et si on veut que d'autres pays rentrent aussi dans cette stratégie, il va falloir que l'Europe se pose la question de l'aide qu'elle pourrait apporter sur cette mise en place. Elle l'a fait sur les crises, et elle continue de le faire, que je sache, sur les crises actuellement. Mais pourquoi ne pas l'envisager sur au moins la partie monitoring, qui est une obligation indispensable, et qui permettrait probablement d'ouvrir la porte de pays qui, aujourd'hui, pour des raisons économiques, ne veulent pas y aller. Voilà, j'en ai fini.
Très bien. Merci Louis. Chère Madame Niger, je vous passe la parole. Fabienne Niger est responsable de filière à la Fédération française des commerçants en bestiaux. Vous avez la parole, Madame.
Oui. Bonjour à tous. C'est bon. Tout d'abord, je remercie les députés pour l'invitation à participer à ce panel. Le commerce, au même titre que la santé animale, est essentiel pour la pérennité de nos cheptels européens. Donc il m'a été demandé de parler commerce face à cette réalité sanitaire d'aujourd'hui. Alors quelques mots sur le commerce. Le commerce, en fait, c'est la valorisation des animaux produits par nos éleveurs. La valorisation est maximale quand les débouchés commerciaux sont nombreux et diversifiés. Plus on a de débouchés commerciaux ouverts, plus les commerçants en bestiaux peuvent faire jouer la concurrence, donc faire monter le prix des animaux au bénéfice des éleveurs. Donc le commerce contribue directement aux revenus des éleveurs. Alors la diversité des marchés, c'est quoi? C'est 3 volets. On a un volet national, donc commerce sur le territoire national. On voit qu'il peut être mis à mal quand certaines maladies génèrent un zonage, comme la France actuellement. Nous avons une France coupée en deux par le zonage de la maladie hémorragique épizootique, avec des conditions pour circuler depuis la zone contaminée vers la zone indemne. On a les flux européens, donc le marché européen. Ces flux européens sont essentiels pour mettre en relation les zones de naissance et les zones d'engraissement au sein de l'Union européenne. La France, par exemple, est un grand pays de naissance. On a le premier cheptel bovin européen. Et nous envoyons notamment nos bovins vers nos principaux partenaires commerciaux qui sont l'Espagne et l'Italie. Donc la France est un pays de naissance. À côté de ça, nous avons des pays engraisseurs comme l'Espagne et l'Italie. À titre informatif, nous envoyons à peu près 1 million de broutards vers ces 2 pays, 405 broutards et jeunes veaux, bovins tous âges, 450 000 vers l'Espagne et 850 000 vers l'Italie. Donc maintenir ces flux commerciaux, c'est juste essentiel pour notre souveraineté alimentaire à l'échelle européenne. Il faut mettre à profit nos zones de production qui sont différentes selon la géographie, les structures, etc. Alors, l'enjeu des conditions sanitaires au mouvement. Je vais me focaliser sur les maladies vectorielles puisqu'elles sont la réalité d'aujourd'hui pour les filières ruminants. On en a déjà beaucoup parlé. L'arrivée de la MHE et de la BTV3 en Europe a mis à mal le marché intérieur. Quand on lit la réglementation européenne, on a l'impression que les mouvements sont possibles, mais de façon pratico-pratique, en tout cas de notre point de vue opérationnel, on est très clairement dans des situations de blocage avec des mouvements qui sont empêchés. Alors si les règles européennes avaient un sens dans le passé, il est grand temps de les revoir pour tenir compte de la situation actuelle. Nous avons besoin d'une libre circulation des animaux. Le revenu des éleveurs en dépend. Alors, selon nous, l'enjeu des conditions de mouvement est double. On a 2 obligations. On a un enjeu sanitaire. Évidemment, on ne va pas envoyer un animal à risque dans un pays indemne. Et on a l'enjeu commercial. On en a parlé, la libre circulation en Europe. C'est la pérennité de notre élevage européen et le revenu de nos éleveurs. Voilà. Alors, avant de poursuivre, je vais juste faire un petit aparté, puisqu'on sait que la loi santé animale nous permet d'envoyer des animaux vers tout État membre sous couvert de 2 modalités possibles. On a le stockage préalable dans des bâtiments vecteurs protégés et on a le stockage préalable pendant une période saisonnièrement indemne. Alors c'est joli sur le papier, mais concrètement on ne sait pas faire, les dispositions sont trop compliquées. Donc comme ma contribution a plutôt une visée opérationnelle, je vais mettre de côté ces modalités-là parce que de façon pratique on ne sait pas faire. Alors, l'État membre de destination, il a besoin d'être assuré. Donc, on a 2 modalités qui permettent d'apporter les garanties sanitaires envers cet État membre, la vaccination et la PCR. Par conséquent, si on veut pouvoir rétablir la libre circulation au sein de l'Union européenne, il va être important que les conditions générales soient revues et qu'elles prévoient explicitement l'envoi, alors sous couvert de vaccination, on l'a déjà, mais également sous couvert de PCR. S'il est normal que la réglementation fixe l'attendu sanitaire, en revanche, elle doit nous laisser le choix du moyen. Le moyen, en l'occurrence, c'est la vaccination ou le PCR. Le moyen, après, chacun va choisir le moyen en fonction de sa situation, selon la préparation sanitaire des animaux, ont-ils été vaccinés ou non, selon la disponibilité des vaccins. Et là, je vais rejoindre Benoit Cassart, son intervention tout à l'heure sur le vaccin de la MHE. Donc, je rappelle que le vaccin de la MHE, déjà, n'a pas été développé pour les ovins. Donc, voilà. Donc, pour l'instant, les ovins, en tout cas, ils ne quittent pas la France depuis la zone MHE. Ce n'est pas possible. La disponibilité des vaccins, c'est aussi un enjeu d'autorisation. Je vais repréciser ce que disait Benoît tout à l'heure. On a une autorisation nationale délivrée par la France. On a une autorisation nationale délivrée par la Belgique. nous ne pouvons toujours pas envoyer des animaux depuis la France vers la Belgique. Donc voilà. Mais bon, je pense que tout ça devrait pouvoir avancer assez rapidement. Après, la disponibilité, c'est aussi les stocks, etc. Mais ça a été évoqué par la fédération avec Roxane tout à l'heure. Ils ont besoin de visibilité, donc effectivement, il faut bien leur donner nos besoins et après, ils mettront en fabrication en face. On va choisir le moyen aussi selon le niveau de circulation du virus. Et là, c'est vraiment notre retour d'expérience très malheureux de la France avec la MHE et le BTV3. C'est-à-dire que, effectivement, quand le virus circule, les PCR, elles sont positives. Et donc, l'export, pour pouvoir exporter, il faut un résultat négatif. Donc, effectivement, quand on a un virus qui circule, on a beaucoup plus intérêt à encourager la vaccination, au moins un animal valablement vacciné, avec un vaccin reconnu. C'est une garantie de mouvement. En tout cas, le mouvement sera possible. Quand on fait des PCR, parce que les animaux n'ont pas été vaccinés, ou parce que le vaccin n'est pas disponible, évidemment, il faut un résultat négatif. Donc, quand le virus circule, on peut avoir des taux de positivité élevés, ça nous empêche les mouvements. Des taux de positivité élevés, c'est très important, c'est de 50 à 70%. Donc, vous imaginez bien, ça devient très compliqué à gérer et à commercialiser nos animaux. Toutefois, il est vraiment important d'avoir ces deux outils puisque chacun choisira celui qui est adapté à sa situation pour un envoi vers tout État membre. En complément de ce choix entre la PCR et la vaccination, il nous semble important que les conditions générales incluent de fait le principe d'équivalence. C'est-à-dire qu'il devrait, selon nous, s'appliquer de facto et non pas de façon dérogatoire. Je vais reprendre ce que disait Benoit Cassart tout à l'heure. Il va être important de raisonner les maladies vectorielles à l'échelle de l'unité spatiale épidémiologique. Voilà, on a une unité épidémiologique, à l'intérieur on circule librement. C'est par exemple le cas à la MHE France-Espagne. Bon, voilà, voilà, donc c'est monter de l'Espagne vers la France. En fait, on est une unité et entre nous, ça circule. Évidemment, les animaux malades, ils restent à la maison, mais pour le reste, voilà, il n'y a pas de conditions particulières. Le principe d'équivalence, ça veut dire que si le sérotype est présent au départ et à l'arrivée, alors il n'y a pas de condition vis-à-vis de ce sérotype. Il faudrait que ça soit inclus de fait. Donc pour résumer, la libre circulation des animaux est le garantie d'un meilleur revenu pour nos éleveurs. Donc à très court terme, il faut revoir les conditions générales pour les mouvements vis-à-vis de la FCO, mais aussi de la MHE, pour garantir cette libre circulation. Donc le choix du moyen, vaccination PCR, pour ne pas envoyer un animal à risque, bien sûr, et l'application du principe d'équivalence. Mais à court terme, et pour conclure, il va sans doute falloir qu'on se repose notre question sur notre approche européenne des maladies vectorielles. Puisqu'on l'a vu, ce sont des maladies émergentes, difficilement éradicables, réchauffement climatique, elles se plaisent chez nous, etc. Petits vecteurs, on ne va pas pouvoir l'éradiquer a priori. Ça peut vouloir dire qu'on va devoir vivre avec ces maladies. Vivre au mieux avec ces maladies, ça veut dire limiter l'impact sur nos animaux, évidemment. Et donc, comment limiter l'impact clinique sur nos animaux tout en préservant notre marché intérieur européen, puisqu'on va raisonner à l'échelle européenne. Ça peut vouloir dire mettre sur le marché, et là on fait appel aux fabricants, dès que possible, ce vaccin multivalent qui nous permettra de protéger contre l'ensemble des sérotypes qui circulent au sein de l'Union européenne, peut-être pas les 24, mais au minimum un vaccin. Alors je ne sais pas, peut-être avec les nouvelles technologies, ARN, etc. Mais on a besoin de ce vaccin pour avoir une approche européenne contre l'ensemble des sérotypes qui circulent en Europe. Ensuite, il faudra promouvoir la vaccination des animaux à risque. Il faudra faire l'analyse de risque et cibler l'EFSA pourra nous aider à avoir une stratégie vaccinale la plus efficace possible. Et bien sûr, il faudra décatégoriser les maladies vectorielles, FCO et MHE. Merci pour votre attention.
Merci beaucoup. Et sans plus attendre, je passe la parole à Barbara Logar, qui est chef d'unité adjointe G2, Animal Health, à la Commission européenne. Barbara, bonne chance. Allez-y.
Voilà, bonjour et merci Olivier. Donc je vais passer en anglais, évidemment. Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm here instead of Francisco Riviego. I'm not Francisco Riviego, as you can see. I'm Barbara Logan, in fact, but we work very closely together in the same unit. So I would like to thank also the honorable members of the Parliament for inviting us here and to talk about the important topic of vaccination. I have a few slides here. I will go fast through them. And as you will see, there will be several parts of the slides where we have already touched upon a little bit on the discussion before, and maybe I will come during my presentation back to the points that were raised earlier in previous panels. Next slide, please. We are discussing vaccination and vaccination policies, and to be honest, and everybody's asking for the possibility of vaccination, do more vaccination, and in fact we have came over this, or we did this paradigm shift concerning the vaccination already with the new animal health law, which was adopted in 2016. So now in the EU, we have very many possibilities to do vaccination, and we are doing it. We are doing it. And we have different areas where we can use vaccination. We are using vaccination for disease prevention. We have heard about avian influenza, and we will come back to it a little bit later. We are doing it to control the diseases in emergency situations, and we are using widely vaccination in our eradication programs, which is extremely important. And by using vaccination in the past years, or even decades, we have managed to eradicate some of very important diseases, and the example, for example, of a lumpy skin disease, and the video that you have seen in the beginning was one such obvious example, and we have discussed it. The use of vaccination has supported the eradication in many member states, and our vaccination rules, which is very important, are aligned with the international standards of the World Organization for Animal Health. And we will hear a little bit more about that later, and with the scientific advice provided by EFSA, and you have heard in Frank Verdonck's intervention how we use that expertise, we as risk managers on our side. Next slide, please. We speak a lot about vaccination. Can we use it in a harmonized way or not? But vaccination is a global issue, and we have very different diseases that we have to tackle, and very different circumstances. So in some cases, we are using vaccination in domestic, in animals that are kept on farms. In some cases, we are doing vaccination with wild animals. And for rabies, for example, we are using vaccination with aerial distribution of vaccine baits to immunize foxes, to fight against important zoonotic disease. For vector-borne diseases, this was mentioned very many times today, there must be a massive coverage to ensure the eradication of the disease with at least 95% of susceptible bovine and ovine animals for a long period of time of 5 years. For some other diseases, and that was also mentioned in the beginning by a member of the Parliament, Cassart, for some infectious diseases, we have vaccination that can be used until the last stages of eradication, when we must stop the vaccination in order to get and obtain the disease-free status, and this is in case of IBR, infectious bovine rhinotracheitis, bovine viral diarrhea, and Augeski's disease. Next slide, please. So, animal health law was a paradigm shift, especially for what we call category A diseases, for those where in the past we used non-vaccination policy, and we culled all animals by default, and only in very exceptional cases the vaccination was used. Now, in fact, the law opens up the possibility, and we have a specific dedicated delegated regulation which sets out rules and gives the possibility to use vaccines, while at the same time it sets the rules in a way that the use of those vaccines is safe. That means that the vaccination it follows a certain framework, and that is accompanied by certain risk mitigating measures, can also be movement restrictions for animals and products, and surveillance. And when we draft this legislation, we always take account of the newly available scientific knowledge and, of course, the international standards. Next slide, please. I will not enter, so here you can see the structure of this delegated act, and I'm not going to enter explaining it here because that's not the purpose. The thing is just that you can see how well thought the whole system is in order to ensure really also practically the use of vaccination for diseases, and in that case we would use emergency protective vaccination in case of outbreak, but we, for some diseases, and that's the case for highly pathogenic avian influenza, allow also for preventive vaccination that was so beneficially used in France in the past season, and it continues. Next slide, please. What else I need to say here is that we are regularly updating these rules, taking on board change standards of World Organization of the Animal Health. We are taking into account IF's opinions, and especially in relation to highly pathogenic avian influenza vaccination. And we are amending several annexes and articles. You can see here that we are also forward-looking. You may notice that we are developing annexes for African swine fever. We know that for the moment there is still no safe vaccine for that disease, but we have, through a research, some promising results, and we are hopeful that we will get a good vaccine that can be really used to get rid of this nasty disease very soon. That's why we try to anticipate already and try to provide some elements of the rules for African swine fever. What you don't see here, and it's maybe it's our mistake, is we are of course going to amend also the annex concerning highly pathogenic avian influenza based on the most recent EFSA scientific opinion considering that. Next slide, please. Opportunities, possibilities. We have spoken a lot, you have spoken a lot about blue tongue, which is a big challenge, and market possibilities. As you can see from the slide that was shown already in the morning, well, there are only few countries and regions which are free from the disease, and all the rest are colored in blue or in yellow. And all where there is colored in blue and in yellow, people will need to vaccinate if we have blue tongue. So this is all a potential market also for the pharmaceutical industry, and for everybody to be aware that once we have blue tongue, and my director, Bernard Van Gieten, earlier mentioned very nicely, once we have it, we have to live with it, and the vaccine is the most effective tool to deal with it. Next one, please. The example of France was mentioned as a successful example of using the vaccination. This was done last year. They have provided us with the vaccination program, and they are continuing this year until 2025. And in terms of costs, Olivier, my colleague, he mentioned very nicely, well, there were costs, big costs, and everything is a cost when it comes to disease control and prevention as well. If we move to next slide, there I'm just coming back to my last 2 slides because the costs were mentioned earlier, and Bernard van Gouthem clearly explained that he would like to have a bigger budget, but unfortunately the budget is as it is, and the budget was always like it is. The thing is that we have spent a lot of money for emergency measures in the past years, and that's why, what Bernard also mentioned, there is a minus in the budget line. And because of that, we had to diminish the co-financing rates at the EU level from 50-75 in 2021-2022 to 20-30 in the years to come. And taking into consideration all these, we have tried to do all the possible to move funds where they were not used for emergency measures, but still money is not enough, and it is what it is. Next slide, please. Which is my last slide, is just to show you that we have a pretty good idea for each and every disease what are the costs and how money is spent and how EU co-financing is spent. And it's true, you can see here the compensations for animals slaughtered or culled represents 75% of that pie, and all the other costs are lower. Now, how would a vaccination in the future impact this picture, or what would it mean for our costs is for us impossible to say now. We will be able to see that only retrospectively. And before concluding, so that's my last slide. I'd like to thank you, but before concluding, I would just like to echo some of my previous speakers that yes, vaccination is an excellent supportive tool, but biosecurity is key.
Thank you so much, Barbara. Très bien. Et maintenant, notre dernier speaker, last but not least, Montserrat Arroyo, qui est directeur général adjointe de l'OMSA, de l'Organisation mondiale de la santé animale, en charge des standards internationaux, enfin des normes internationales plutôt en français, et de la science. Montserrat, tu as la parole. Et je suis content de voir que tes slides sont bien arrivés.
Merci beaucoup. I will go to English, and first I want to thank the deputies for this invitation. For us, it's really important as the World Organization for Animal Health to come and put in a little bit the perspective of what is going on worldwide. The next one, and just for a little bit of a background, I was happy to hear that we were cited in several of the presentations, but we are an organization that is over 100 years old, and we were created with the main goal of protecting animal health. We have four main areas of work. We work for the transparency, so we actually help countries say what is their animal health situation. We develop standards, and these standards are adopted by our members. We have 183 members. We also support the animal health capacity building. So for us, it's really important, and we always advocate for to have strong veterinary services. If we don't have that, it's very difficult to help support good animal health. And we also have global initiatives that are strategies for both in-country and world support for high-impact diseases. So next one, please. In general, we always say, and we've discussed here, the standards. It was Nancy that said we have the tools and the rules. So actually the standards, that's what they provide. They provide the tools and the rule for reporting listed diseases, for countries to actually develop their own national policy and their sanitary systems. They also support for them to assess whether potential trading partners' health situation is good or bad. And based on that, they can draft their import sanitary measures, but also they can make their certification on whether their products or their animals have the good standards to be able to be traded without any animal health issues. Next one, please. So this panel was asking, okay, what are the trade-offs between culling and vaccinations? And I think throughout the day we've heard and we had a lot of inputs on how animal health policy has been implemented in our current reality, with the focus on vaccines and how to safeguard not just animal health, but also livelihood and food security. A lot of statistics have been presented, and when we think that just when we focus on avian influenza from 2005 to 2023, over 448 million domestic birds were culled. And we're thinking that over 2025, we anticipate that this number will exceed 500 million. So the question is, what is the trade-off between culling and vaccination? When we think about culling, yes, the aim is, the application is for eradication, but it's also a tool. They can prevent pathogen entering and contaminating new individuals and populations. It can eliminate and reduce the size of reservoirs, as well as pathogen transmission within hosts. It has an efficacy and a cost effectiveness, but it also needs to be accompanied by other tools, movement control, quarantines, etc. But they keep raising legitimate conservation and animal welfare concerns. So it is a tool, it can help us, but we need to balance. Next one, please. So on the other hand, we have vaccination. It can provide a sustainable means of controlling a disease. It can preserve animal populations and associated livelihoods, of course, but it does require upfront investment, a commitment to monitor and manage the vaccine efficacy over time, and it can be a short, medium, but also a long-term strategy. But again, it's one tool of the many tools that we have. It requires, and it needs to be accompanied by biosecurity, by surveillance, by movement control, sometimes by zoning. It can involve lower direct cost, but also high indirect cost. And just in this panel, some of these costs have already been managed. It does require to have a strategy, and this strategy needs to be robust. It has to have surveillance. It has to have an adequate match between the circulating strain and the vaccine that is being used. And of course, even if we don't want to, it may affect trade. It's a reality. So what are the lessons learned of using, next one please, vaccination programs against avian influenza? Well, I think we can draw from different lessons. There are different countries that are using vaccination in different settings with different risk. So, for example, in China, Bangladesh, Egypt, Indonesia, Vietnam, they're using vaccination because the disease has become endemic. In France, it has been used as a preventive, and I think it was very courageous of France to take over the vaccination due to the conditions, the conditions of France. They have successful preventive vaccination. We've seen the results. They can proudly say that they have reduced the number of outbreaks to the observed numbers. But China also is using vaccination, and they have proved also that they have improved animal welfare, they have reduced economic damage, they have reduced human infections with avian influenza viruses. But again, the success of using vaccination or not depends a lot on the strategy, on a very robust surveillance, because if not, it can really, on adequate matching to field strain, and also it is very resource-intensive capacity. I'm sure Olivier can say that the veterinary services are a little bit, they have invested a lot for this for this implementation.
Sarah, I'll just interrupt you a second. I think we'll lose translation at noon. We will probably have to take the questions without translation and also the conclusions without translation. So whatever time we can gain.
I can always answer in Spanish if you want. Next one. We have all these strategies, and what comes next? Should we prevent or compensate? The reality, I think, is not one or the other. They go together. Preparedness and response, they are public goods, and it's better to prevent than to compensate. But sometimes you have no other choice. And prevention can take several forms, as well as compensation. But when you have limited budgets, we need a clear justification and, of course, a cost-benefit analysis. Vaccines can be used on both frameworks, and compensation can be used also for incentives for prevention, for example, implementing a good biosecurity, strengthening the veterinary services and the veterinary capacity, so that everybody can participate to early detection measures. Next one, please. So the last question that was asked for this panel is how can we improve the acceptability of vaccines with trade partners? In reality, the codes that have already been adopted by our 183 members say that trade in poultry and poultry products can take place safely in the presence of vaccination. It's just a matter of our members implementing what they adopt. The Terrestrial Animal Health Code allows the use of vaccination under specific conditions and without negatively impacting the highly pathogenic avian influenza-free status if appropriate surveillance is conducted. And that's where the strategy is very important. And that's where also, if we want to work with trade partners, trust is important. And I think the term that was used here, and I really like this sanitary diplomacy. We call it policy, but the reality is that the sanitary diplomacy is very important. And this building on trust is not done from one day to the other. It's not done because I send you my risk assessment, I send you my documents. That is built. That is built over time, and that is built with the consistency of actions within the different members. It needs to be built before, during, and after the implementation of a vaccine strategy. We also have, and it's something, other tools that can support this, the zoning and compartmentalization, and also the Animal Health Code also provides other risk-based guidance for trade. So the tools are there, the rules are there, but what we need is that for our members to accept them. So just, I will finish with this last slide. We cannot say that vaccine can be a one-size-fits-all solution. It's not a magic wand. It needs to be, and it needs to be implemented based on risk. It needs to be implemented according to the national capacity and the national situation. And it can be implemented with other tools. So we need members to respect and implement WOA international standards. They're there. We have, there was a comment saying, okay, vaccines should be used, for example, for IVR. Currently, our code does not allow for a country to use vaccination and declare itself free. But our codes are based on science. So if enough science is gathered to promote this change in the codes, in the standard, then the members can adopt and say, hey, you know, we can do that, not only for IVR, but for other diseases when this is not contemplated, okay? Finally, the use of vaccination needs to be compliant with the rules, with the regulation, and it should not have a negative consequence on trade as per WOA standards. And finally, it needs to be accompanied by a robust vaccination monitoring and disease surveillance system. So with that, I think in conclusion, vaccination and prevention are big challenges in the animal health policy. They can be complex, but we have the tools that combine together to support, that can support the resolution of these complexities. Vaccination is one of those tools, biosecurity is another, the use of zoning and compartmentalization another, but we also need the engagement of all stakeholders, in particular also trade partners. But with these tools, with these rules, we can navigate today's reality and secure a healthier future for animals and for us all. Thank you.
Merci, Montserrat. Une seule question, parce que nous sommes très contraints, je suis désolé.
Oui. Une seule question, très brève, pour Madame Rivego. On vient d'entendre qu'il y avait une possibilité au niveau de l'évolution de la science d'ouvrir la porte à la vaccination. Je voudrais vous demander, est-ce que ça pourrait se faire dans un délai raisonnable? Parce que je reviens avec le manque d'Europe. Par exemple, en Belgique, on a une politique IBR assez proactive, comme en France. En Hollande, le pays voisin, ils ont beaucoup de retard. Avoir une politique IBR sans vaccination en Belgique, alors qu'on arrive en fin de lutte et que la maladie peut se répandre comme une traînée de poudre dans un cheptel totalement indemne sans vaccination, c'est de l'inconscience et c'est un coût économique énorme. Donc, est-ce qu'on pourrait envisager à court terme d'avoir des possibilités de revacciner tout en ayant un statut indemne, puisque la science permet de faire la distinction entre les souches vaccinales et sauvages? Merci.
Barbara.
Yes, thank you very much for your question. This is not a new question for us. We know it, and we know that there are challenges with the eradication of certain diseases, and we are perfectly aware of the challenge that Belgium is facing with the eradication of IBR. On IBR, several member states have already achieved eradication, and they are free. And they have done, we have a big proportion, some proportion. It is not easy to do it. Indeed, Montserrat here mentioned that according to the WOA standards, free status for IBR with the vaccination is not possible. And our EU rules now follow the same approach as we have in the international standards. We could change, but not in a short term, because before changing, we would need really to have enough of scientific evidence that the vaccination is safe and under what circumstances, and that this can support freedom. And for that, we would need to ask EFSA. We would not need to ask EFSA there, maybe also EMA, but basically for us, it would be EFSA. That would take some time, and then as a next step, we would need to work in the context of World Organization for Animal Health, that the standards there also change in order to allow trade, international trade. So if we are to embark on this, it would be a very long-lasting process, but we do not know what the outcome would be because it depends on the science.
Merci Barbara. Je suis malheureusement obligé de tenir compte du temps, de demander à messieurs les députés de venir conclure. Je remercie infiniment tous les panélistes. Je remercie aussi les traducteurs qui ont travaillé dur. Je voulais aussi dire que les panélistes sont invités à déjeuner à l'extérieur du Parlement, si j'ai bien compris, près de l'hôtel Léopold. Donc il faudra suivre Bertie et Frédéric pour les personnes qui voudront les suivre. Voilà. Merci à tous de votre présence et je laisse la parole à messieurs les députés.
Thank you very much. Now I try it in English. First, I'd like to thank all the panelists for being here and to give us all the information. We heard a lot about collaboration, about financing, and the difficulties to use vaccination worldwide and don't have any negative effects on the trading system. For me, my opinion is that we have still to work on the problem. It's a long way for us to go, but we have to go forward and foster the process to do something for animal welfare and also for animal health.
Oui, je vais être bref parce que le temps est passé, mais je voudrais quand même insister. Ici, on est au Parlement européen, on est au cœur de l'Europe, et je crois que plus que jamais dans ce domaine de la santé animale, comme dans beaucoup d'autres, on a besoin de plus d'Europe. plus d'Europe pour une harmonisation des politiques sanitaires, plus d'Europe pour l'agrément des vaccins et l'utilisation et la distribution des vaccins, et plus d'Europe pour les mouvements des animaux, qu'ils puissent circuler librement dans une Europe qui permet de valoriser au mieux les animaux en tenant compte de toutes les spécificités régionales. Ce sont des fondements de l'Europe et on doit aller vers cela. Et la politique sanitaire locale s'est complètement dépassée dans le monde d'aujourd'hui. Merci à tous les panélistes d'avoir répondu à notre attente et je crois qu'on a passé une matinée très intéressante.
Merci Benoît, merci beaucoup aussi aux modérateurs parce que c'est un exercice difficile. Merci beaucoup aussi aux traducteurs qui sont allés au-delà de l'horaire qu'on avait convenu, qui nous permettent donc à chacun de profiter des derniers moments j'allais dire de translation, mais voilà, c'est comme dans la maison ici, on utilise un peu toutes les langues. Et merci beaucoup à Stefan Köhler aussi de sa présence. Je crois que la matinée a été extrêmement riche en informations, extrêmement riche aussi sur la nécessité que l'on a à se coordonner, à faire avancer. Alors beaucoup de choses se font, ça on a compris. On a formidablement avancé en très peu de temps ces dernières années par la force des événements, par la force aussi du réchauffement climatique qui font que ces épisodies sont de plus en plus fréquentes. Mais on sent que nous avons besoin à l'évidence de faire évoluer nos outils juridiques, nos outils industriels et aussi, on l'a bien compris, nos outils financiers. Aussi la collaboration entre les États. Moi, je crois beaucoup au concept d'une seule santé. On a beaucoup parlé de santé animale, mais n'oublions pas que les épisodies d'aujourd'hui sont souvent les zoonoses de demain et qu'on ne peut pas séparer la santé animale de la santé humaine en général et de la santé, j'ai envie de dire, de notre planète de façon absolument générale. Donc, tout ce qui aujourd'hui est à nos portes nous concerne, notamment dans les fermes, notamment dans les campagnes. C'est quelque chose qui doit concerner l'ensemble des citoyens de l'Union européenne. Donc c'est pour ça que je crois que c'est le panel, les panélistes qui étaient là sont souvent à l'avant-garde de sujets qui vont être au devant de la scène pour les prochaines années. Donc beaucoup de travail encore sur la table pour les co-législateurs que nous sommes, au Parlement européen, au Conseil. Je crois qu'aujourd'hui, ces sujets-là sont vraiment au centre du débat politique. Essayons qu'ils le restent. Merci beaucoup pour votre présence nombreuse aujourd'hui qui marque l'intérêt pour ce sujet.